Timeless Assassin. BU author Raj_Shah_7152 Chapter 476-500. Chapter 476, The First Secret Technique. An unknown training facility, Planet Vorthas. While Leo found himself oddly nostalgic at the sight of all the twisted torture equipment scattered around the field, Ver stood frozen, his brow furrowed with disbelief as he looked from one contraption to another, unable to understand what kind of place they had been brought to. Unlike Leo, whose assassin training had begun in a torture park not too different from this one, Ver had grown up learning street combat, crude dueling routines, and simple body-strengthening drills, none of which prepared him for what he now saw before him. "What is this place?" he asked slowly, voice laced with unease as he took a cautious step toward one of the larger metal rigs. "Why is there a contraption here that's literally designed to hang someone to death?" He gestured toward the rope-bound gallows-like structure beside him, eyes widening as he glanced towards the neck loop and adjustable crank at the base. "Ah, that." A deep voice cut through the silence, causing both him and Leo to snap their heads around. The 12th Elder had appeared from seemingly nowhere, his robes fluttering slightly despite the still air. "That is one of our more refined tools," the Elder said, voice calm and instructional, as though he were pointing out items in a museum. "It's used to strengthen the neck muscles, decompress the spine, and improve overall lung capacity." He stepped closer and gave the contraption a light tap with his knuckles. "You adjust the height so that you're forced to balance on your toes, stretching upward just enough to catch a desperate breath. Then, you let yourself hang for a few minutes. Then up again. Then down. Over and over. Hours at a time." Ver's face contorted in horror. "You're telling me that's training?" "Yes," the 12th Elder said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It teaches your brain to stay functional even under extreme oxygen deprivation. It trains your neck to handle trauma, and your spine to bear unnatural pressure without snapping." He walked past another metal frame, this one lined with thin spikes across its interior surface. "Each contraption you see around you has one purpose: pain. But not senseless pain. Calibrated pain. Focused pain. Pain that builds the kind of control you'll need for what comes next." Ver blinked rapidly, trying to piece together the logic behind this setup. "So all these machines, all this stuff, is built for actual training?" "Correct," the 12th Elder said without hesitation. "Every last piece. Each is designed to isolate a particular muscle group or joint cluster and push it to its breaking point. If you want to learn the first of the cult's 12 secret techniques, then you must first reshape your body to obey your will, not your instincts." He turned slightly and gestured toward the older man standing quietly behind Ver. "Shield of the Dragon, you're dismissed. You're not cleared to hear what I'm about to say next." Valtary, understanding the gravity of the situation, immediately gave a silent bow to Ver, then turned on his heel and disappeared behind a metallic gate, his footsteps echoing away. As only once he was gone did the Elder continue. "The spell I'm about to introduce is known as Shapeshift." Leo's gaze sharpened at the name, while Ver's expression shifted from concern to curiosity. "As you've likely guessed, its main purpose is disguise and infiltration," the Elder continued. "But this isn't something as simple as illusion magic. It's something far deeper." Without further warning, the Elder's form began to distort. His shoulders curved downward, his chest receded, and his skin shifted tone. Within moments, he stood as an almost perfect mirror image of Ver, down to the angular jawline and the faint scar under his left eye. Only the hair color and beard tone remained slightly off. But that, too, changed moments later, with a second wave of refinement smoothing out the remaining differences. "So, Skyshard," the Elder said, now fully wearing Ver's appearance, "can you tell which of us is real?" Leo narrowed his eyes. The only clear giveaway was the robe. Ver's garments were maroon, while the Elder was wearing white. But everything else, from the way their chests rose and fell as they breathed to the way their aura felt in the air, was nearly indistinguishable. "If I ran into him in public like this, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Not unless I was watching for something extremely specific," Leo thought, as he stepped forward, scanning them both again. No, not really, he admitted. You're not wearing the frown Ver always carries when he's overthinking, but that's the only real tell. Aside from that, it's a flawless disguise. The elder gave a small, satisfied smile, then transformed back into his original form. The brilliance of shapeshift lies not just in how well it mimics someone's look, but in its stability. Once you shift into a form, it doesn't require active mana flow to maintain. It becomes your default state until you will yourself back into your true form. He gave them both a pointed look. That means you can fight, sleep, eat, and carry out your mission without fear of accidentally breaking the disguise. Unlike illusion spells that can be shattered by perception, this one is practically untouchable, unless someone knows you intimately enough to spot behavioral patterns. Leo nodded slowly, already understanding how powerful that made the technique. And the reason this is your first assignment, the elder continued, is because you'll need to use this skill in nearly every major operation inside the righteous faction's borders. Whether it's sneaking into a raid party to recover a forbidden relic, carrying out an assassination in broad daylight, or stealing intel from the universal government's restricted databases. Shapeshift will be your first line of defense and your greatest advantage. Ver took a slow breath, glancing around once more at the dozens of brutal training tools surrounding them. And all this, he asked quietly, is just so we can learn that one skill. The elder smiled faintly. This skill, Ver, is not merely about disguise. It's about learning how to control every bone, every joint, every muscle and tendon in your body with surgical precision. The pain you will feel here will teach your nerves to obey your will. The strain will forge discipline into your flesh. And the control you gain will become the foundation upon which every technique after this one shall rest. He folded his arms behind his back. If you cannot learn shapeshift, you have no right to learn what comes next. Leo let out a soft breath, eyes scanning the rusted metal again. Looks like it's going to be one of those months, he thought, already preparing himself for what came next. Chapter 477, Demonstration. By the time the 12th Elder began his actual demonstration on how to slowly master the technique, both Leo and Ver had already accepted the fact that this wasn't going to be a conventional lesson. There would be no practice dummies or training gear to learn with. Only metal, straps, and pain. You can theoretically start learning this technique using any contraption present here, but for the sake of simplicity, let's start with this one, which should arguably be the easiest muscle group for you to learn, the elder said, as he stopped in front of a large, barrel-shaped machine, its outer surface covered with flexible steel bands and embedded copper coils. He motioned for their attention, then rolled up the sleeves of his robe and placed his dominant arm into the rig. This contraption targets the brachialis, brachioradialis, and the surrounding connective tissue in your dominant arm. Since your arm might be the tissue you're already well used to using in isolation, let's start with training that first. The machine hissed. The bands clamped down. Muscles twitched beneath the elder's skin as the coils activated, creating a vacuum seal around his forearm that began to apply pressure. At first, it looked like he was just clenching. But within seconds, Leo and Ver saw something shift. The elder's arm expanded, not grotesquely, not in some exaggerated cartoonish way, but with an extreme precision. Veins thickened. Fibers realigned. What had once looked like a trained but average arm now resembled that of a top-tier bodybuilder, right down to the natural striations in the muscle. What I'm doing here is not just inflating muscle with mana, he explained, voice composed even as the machine buzzed with strain. I am reconstructing it naturally. I am pooling mana into the desired region and then allowing my muscles to quickly absorb water from my body to gain size. To ensure that they don't deform, I'm also reinforcing the muscle fibers with mana, and then slowly, I am allowing them to settle down in my frame before reconnecting them to my nerves. With his free hand, he tapped his own bicep. It didn't jiggle. It barely even moved. This is not an illusion. This is structural transformation. The muscle has learned how to expand, contract, and hold form on command. He then reversed the process. In under 3 seconds, the same arm that had ballooned into something worthy of a genetic champion was back to its original build, looking tight, lean and ordinary. This, he said, withdrawing his arm and walking over to a set of data slates, is your next task. The slates activated automatically as the two boys stepped forward, screens lighting up with a grid of high-resolution images. Hundreds of human physiques. Every shape, size, density, and tone imaginable were displayed on the slate, as the 12th Elder handpicked about 25 different images from them. These are some of the arm types I want you to learn how to copy. And once you can copy all 25 to perfection, we move to the next muscle group, he said, as Leo and Ver browsed through the images he had selected. Some of the arms were long and wiry. Some were short and thick. Some arms had exaggerated delts, minimalist triceps, or asymmetrical veins. Some looked completely natural. Others, subtly enhanced through years of bioengineering or magical augmentation. How close does the replication have to be? Leo asked, already calculating the process in his head. Perfect, the Elder replied without hesitation. No sagging. No unnatural taper. No visual mismatch with your current body proportions. If you wish to take the form of a soldier with 20-inch arms, then you must become that soldier. Not just look like him. Leo clicked his tongue but nodded, the challenge already stirring something competitive inside him. Ver, meanwhile, looked overwhelmed. He scrolled through the images, fingers twitching as he viewed muscle after muscle, size after size. There was no rhyme or rhythm to the gallery. Each one looked completely different from the other. This is insane, he muttered. No, the 12th Elder corrected him. Insane would be me expecting you to recreate the physique of an orc or demon. This is easy. He gestured back toward the machine. Now, both of you, insert your dominant arms into the contraption. We begin with the first training cycle. Your job will be to isolate the brachialis, pump mana into the fibers without letting it overflow into adjacent tissue, and then attempt your first controlled expansion. Leo moved first. He slid his arm into the coils and felt the cold grip wrap around his skin like a hungry snake. Ver followed, albeit hesitantly. Once both were secured, the Elder activated the machine. Clank. The internal vacuum triggered. The copper bands tightened. Heat surged through the metal as a soft electric pulse buzzed to life, stimulating the muscles with precision. Focus on control, the Elder instructed. Not brute force. It's not about pouring mana like you're inflating a balloon. You need to trace every thread of muscle from insertion to origin. Target, isolate, expand, sustain. Leo narrowed his eyes, already visualizing his inner circulation. He channeled mana into his right arm, carefully guiding it past the deltoid, ignoring the twitch in his shoulder, and directing it down into the brachialis. He could feel the fibers stretching, resisting, trembling, then slowly, responding, as they absorbed water cells from his bloodstream to grow in size. Ver winced beside him. His mana was leaking into his elbow joint, causing a jolt of pain to shoot up his arm. Too wide, the Elder said flatly. Your focus is scattered. Pull the energy inward, behind the elbow, not through it. Ver gritted his teeth and adjusted. Sweat began to bead on both their foreheads. Every second felt like a minute. The machine didn't ease up. If anything, the pressure was only increasing. This is the first of 108 contraptions, the Elder announced coldly, as the humming noise around them grew louder. Each one targets a unique part of the body. Some will work your jaw. Some will work your toes. Others your ribcage, your earlobes, your tongue, your diaphragm, your spine. Ver felt his stomach twist. Training his earlobes. His damn tongue. What kind of monsters designed this program? Your task is to master every last one. Only then will your body be malleable enough for full-scale shapeshift. Until then, the Elder paused, voice dropping an octave. Until then, consider this as just isolated muscle training. Leo didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Because deep down, he already knew. This was going to be a hell of a training cycle, and it had only just begun. However, while Leo remained unnervingly calm even as the machine's pressure steadily climbed, Ver couldn't hide his discomfort. He winced, groaned, and shifted against the restraints, clearly unused to this kind of prolonged, targeted pain. The hell, Skyshard? You're only a Grandmaster, how are you not flinching under this? Vare asked between clenched teeth, a few minutes into the cycle. Leo gave a faint smile and shook his head. Pain and I go way back, cuz. This isn't enough to make me blink. Planet Vorthas, remote ocean, 180 miles from the nearest civilization. While Leo and Vare were still struggling to grasp the fundamentals of shapeshift, Dupra had already managed to infiltrate planet Vorthas by slipping through its weakest point in planetary defense, a vast, unguarded stretch of ocean in the middle of nowhere. Swim, swim. Cutting through the water in a steady southwest trajectory, Dupra knew he would have to swim non-stop for at least 2 full days before he'd reach land. But the distance didn't bother him in the slightest. I've endured far worse, he muttered, his strokes unbroken as he sliced through the waves. The only real nuisance is how heavy and slow everything feels now. His tone soured slightly as he glanced down at his limbs, once effortless, now sluggish. Being reduced to a mere transcendent. I'd forgotten how limiting this tier feels. With Morris's restriction sealing away his monarch-level power, Dupra felt the dull ache of restraint for the first time in decades, every movement reminding him that his strength was now human again. If I manage to kill the new dragon, I'll regain my freedom. And perhaps, just perhaps, with my newfound freedom I'll be able to build an organization powerful enough to attack the cult and save my son, he murmured, as the resolve in his eyes hardened. Despite Morris advising him to forget about his son. Despite the universe calling him foolish for loving him so much. Dupra never gave up on the idea of rescuing his only child. Because regardless of what people said, in the end, he was a father who yearned to protect his own flesh and blood. Fear not, Darnell, your father is here. Dash 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 dash. Meanwhile, the Skyshard residence, Luke's room, planet Vorthas. Alia sat beside the bed, her fingers gently tracing circles into Luke's frail palm, while her other hand stayed curled around his wrist, holding it close to her cheek as a silent tear slid down her face. She did not speak, did not sob out loud. Just sat there, breathing softly, whispering prayers under her breath. It had been months now. Months since the love of her life had fallen into this state and become an unmoving, silent doll, as the toll on his body kept worsening every day. His ribs were visible beneath the blanket now. His arms, once strong enough to lift her effortlessly, had withered to the point that even the tubes seemed to weigh them down. And yet, she hadn't left his side. Not for a day. Not even once. Please wake up, babe, I can't see you so weak every day, she prayed with all her heart, as suddenly at that moment. A low groan, hoarse and dry, rumbled from Luke's throat. His eyelids twitched and a slight shuffle of his fingers followed. What? Aaliyah's eyes widened, as she froze. Luke's lashes fluttered, the whites of his eyes showing for just a second before they opened properly, slow, confused, unfocused. He blinked twice, gaze shifting around the room before settling on her face, pale, teary, and trembling in disbelief. For a second, he wondered if he had died. If this was heaven. Because if it was, and Alia was here too, then maybe it wasn't so bad after all. But then the pain hit. It came like a wave, deep, raw, and aching. His entire body felt like it had been run through a meat grinder and left to dry. Even breathing hurt bad, as it was the pain that told him that this was definitely not heaven. Hey, beautiful, he rasped, barely audible. Alia gasped. Her tears, already balanced at the edge, tumbled down in full force as she leaned forward and gently hugged his chest, careful not to put any weight on him. Luke, you're awake, she whispered in disbelief, the words breaking apart with emotion. He smiled weakly. That's her voice. I remember that voice. Alia quickly pulled back, wiping at her cheeks as she stumbled toward the door, nearly tripping over her own feet in the rush. Doctor. Mom. Dad. Amanda. Luke is awake. He's awake. Her voice echoed down the corridor like a spark in dry grass. Within moments, footsteps thundered closer. A team of doctors rushed in, followed seconds later by Elena, Jacob, Amanda, and Ben, all panting, all wide-eyed. My baby. Elena whispered upon seeing his open eyes, as she rushed to his side and gently brushed his hair back. Oh, thank the stars. Luke looked at her, too weak to speak much, but the small smile that tugged at his cracked lips said it all. Mom. He did not remember how he got here. Did not remember how he collapsed or the journey that followed. But he did not mind having lost consciousness, now that he woke up with his girlfriend and his family beside him. Amanda crouched near the edge of the bed, squeezing his fingers while Jacob placed a hand over his ankle. The old man, stern and guarded as ever, looked visibly shaken, his jaw clenched tightly as he stood at the foot of the bed. Leo. Luke croaked, looking around slowly. Where's Leo? He's safe, Elena answered softly, brushing his hair again. He's here too, on this planet. He's doing some stuff of his own. But I promise, he's okay. Luke let out a soft sigh, relaxing slightly against the pillows. Thank God. For a few more moments, the room was filled with warm silence, with quiet reassurances, and whispered words of welcome. It was the kind of reunion none of them had dared hope for. Until Jacob stepped forward, his voice, still calm, dropping to a deeper tone. I know you just woke up, he said, eyes hardening, but can you remember who did this to you? The question pierced through the moment. The room froze. Even the chief doctor, who had just finished taking vitals, went still. His hands pausing midair, as a bead of sweat glistened on his forehead. Technically, Luke's memories should have already been altered, sealed beneath the effects of the memory suppression spell cast during his extraction. But if the magic hadn't taken hold completely, then the ruckus that could follow was not going to be pretty at all. Thankfully though, as Luke recalled who did this to him, he did not seem to remember what actually transpired. The Red Army, he said slowly, voice still hoarse but clear. The righteous faction, they hunted me down, like animals. Just because I'm supposedly a carrier of some ancient bloodline. The lead doctor exhaled, finally allowing himself to wipe the sweat from his brow. The spell had held. He needs rest, the doctor said firmly, stepping between the bed and the crowd. This conversation ends here. He's stable, but nowhere near full recovery. I'll permit brief visits, but no stress. No questioning. No memory pushing. Jacob gave a curt nod but didn't look away from Luke. Everyone else slowly began to step back. Alia sat down again, holding Luke's hand once more as if to make sure he wouldn't slip away again. Luke turned his gaze toward her and smiled faintly. I'm back now, don't worry, he said with his eyes, as Alia nodded in affirmation. Leo, someone find a way to contact Leo, even if we don't know how to. I'm sure the bulky soldiers around the house know how to get a hold of him. The boy needs to know that his brother has woken up. Elena said once she was outside Luke's room and into the hall, as Amanda nodded at her instructions, and rushed to talk to a guard at once. Chapter 479, Elder Brother. Planet Vorthas, 12th Elder's Training Facility. 2 full days had passed since the shapeshift training began. 2 days of searing pain, sleepless nights, and relentless trial and error under the hum of copper coils and the hiss of vacuum seals. But despite it all, Leo made progress. His body, long accustomed to stress and micro-adjustments, had begun responding to the training in subtle but tangible ways. He had learned how to isolate the brachialis without letting his mana bleed into his tricep, how to increase water retention in his forearm fibers without distorting proportion, and how to restructure the visual symmetry of a bicep without breaking circulation flow. And now, standing before the 12th Elder once again, Leo held his right arm at a perfect angle, its shape a near-flawless replica of the first image on the data slate. His muscles didn't bulge unnaturally. The veins rested in the same positions as the reference. Even the curvature of the delt and the angle of the elbow joint matched exactly. The 12th Elder stepped forward and examined it without speaking. His eyes scanned every inch with brutal scrutiny, checking the tone, density, shape, nerve connectivity, and mana flow. He tapped the slate once. The screen blinked. Accepted, he said flatly, before flicking the screen to the next image. Now do this one. Leo narrowed his eyes. The next arm was different. It looked longer, wirier, with a more pronounced radial vein and a tighter fiber density near the wrist. But he didn't complain. He simply turned to the machine and began loosening his arm for the reset, as the elder then shifted his gaze to the other side of the facility. There, the younger cousin flinched, sweat still dripping down his brow as he massaged his right forearm, which was now swollen and uneven from a failed attempt a few minutes prior. "You're behind," the elder said. "Catch up." "I'm trying," Ver muttered through clenched teeth, rotating his arm slowly as he winced. "But it's like the moment I get the taper right, the density shifts, or the veins disappear, or the damn nerves lock up." "That's because you're forcing the visual outcome," the elder replied. "Shapeshift is not a costume. It is anatomical mimicry. You must understand the function before the form." Leo kept his head down, not saying a word, as he mentally rewound the process and prepared for the next transformation. But for the first time since the training began, he found himself glancing sideways, watching as Ver sat down beside the machine, grumbling quietly to himself as he reviewed the diagrams again and again, clearly frustrated, clearly lost. Leo exhaled slowly. They weren't rivals anymore. That had already been decided. Now, they were partners bound by the same legacy. And even if being an elder brother didn't come naturally to him, something about Ver's sincerity during the past 2 days of training stayed with him, enough to stir a quiet sense of obligation, or perhaps even the beginning of camaraderie. "You're doing it wrong," Leo finally said, his voice calm but direct. Ver looked up, blinking in confusion. "What? I don't think you understand human anatomy on a fundamental level," Leo continued, his gaze flicking toward the distorted muscle shape Ver had formed. "Were you ever formally taught this stuff?" Ver let out a dry snort. "I was raised an orphan. The only education I got is what I scraped together myself." Leo nodded, not with pity, but understanding. "All right then. Pick up your data slate and come here. There's something important I want to show you." Ver hesitated for a second, slightly thrown off. He hadn't expected Leo to help him. But since the man was offering, he wasn't proud enough to refuse, as without a word, he walked over and stood beside Leo, slate in hand. Leo leaned in and guided Ver through the interface, opening up a detailed anatomical diagram of the human arm. He began pointing out the brachialis, the brachioradialis, and several minor muscle groups that Ver hadn't even known the names of. "These are the ones you're meant to isolate," Leo explained. "You're not just pumping mana into your arm randomly. Each fiber has a function. Some create bulk, some provide control, others support shape. If you don't know which is which, you'll never replicate the image properly." Ver squinted at the diagram, brows furrowed. At first, it all looked like a blur of unknown names and muscle fibers. But Leo was patient. He zoomed in, rotated the models, and even showed a layered breakdown of what each muscle did when tensed or relaxed. "Try flexing this part," Leo said, tapping a region just below the bicep. "Feel that? Now, look at the diagram. That's the part you're flooding too early. Pull back. Target here instead." Bit by bit, Ver began to catch on. His confusion gave way to clarity as he finally understood which muscle did what, and how each one responded to specific mana commands. "Oh, so that's the muscle I was supposed to channel mana into," he muttered in realization, eyes wide as the pieces clicked into place. Leo gave a small nod. "Exactly." With renewed focus, Ver returned to his machine and tried again. This time, guided by both visual reference and Leo's corrections, he managed to mimic the first reference image almost perfectly within 2 hours. The 12th elder inspected his work, then gave a short nod of approval before switching the screen to the second image. Next, Ver looked over at Leo, his breathing still heavy from the strain, but his eyes lit with something new. Gratitude. Sincere and unguarded. This moment had further elevated Leo's position in his mind, as even though Leo didn't have to, he still gave real, useful pointers. As for the first time since arriving on Vorthas, Ver began to feel a genuine connection with Leo. It wasn't quite friendship yet, but it was a start. His cousin did not seem like a bad man after all. Chapter 480, The Assassination Plan. It took Leo 5 more days of rigorous training to master all 25 arm replications, by the end of which his control over the shapeshift technique had improved by leaps and bounds. "I think I've finally got the hang of it," he said, rotating his shoulder with a relaxed ease he hadn't felt all week. "Hopefully, it won't take me this long to morph the other body parts." The 12th Elder gave a slight nod of approval. "Once you've fully mastered one section, the rest of the body tends to follow more easily. Most parts are simpler in comparison, though you will still struggle when it comes to the face." He paused for emphasis. "That's the most difficult. But the rest, you should be fine." The Elder's words weren't particularly warm, but the subtle note of validation in his tone was enough to reaffirm Leo's progress. Compared to him, Ver was still lagging behind slightly, having completed only 18 of the 25 arm configurations. Still, he had made steady progress of his own, with each day bringing sharper control and clearer understanding of the technique. "You boys have been training non-stop for a full week," the 12th Elder said, finally setting the slate aside. "Tomorrow will be a rest day for you both." Leo exhaled, relieved at the thought of a brief pause. "Skyshard, you're scheduled to return to Juxta for the day. Commander Charles wants you. And as for you, Ver, you'll accompany me to the capital to attend the annual Autumn Festival. The commoners are excited to celebrate with the new dragon," he added, his tone softening slightly. "And they've prepared a few special events in your honor." Leo glanced at Ver, one brow raised. The younger cousin seemed caught off guard at first, his expression tightening for a moment, clearly uncomfortable by the idea of attending a public festival where he was the center of attraction. However, he soon nodded in acceptance. "If I finish early at the festival," Ver asked, "can I come back here to train?" "I don't want to fall too far behind, cousin." The 12th Elder shrugged. "If you want to spend your only rest day training, you're free to do as you please." Meanwhile, planet Vorthas, capital city, the merchant district. Dupra moved like a shadow through the cobbled lanes of the capital, his pace unhurried, his hood drawn low over his brow. Having reached the heart of a cult city, he changed his appearance to mimic that of a common traveler, with a sun-touched skin, streaks of gray in his beard, and the faint smell of saltwater still clinging to his clothes, despite him having reached shore 3 days ago. Every step he took was measured, every glance purposeful. He passed by fruit stalls, incense vendors, and smithy workshops, absorbing the city's rhythm, feeling its pulse, gauging how tightly it clung to its routines and how easily it might fracture. Tomorrow, they said, was the Autumn Day Festival. And the streets were already stirring with excitement. "You think they'll bring the new dragon through Central Square or down the old canal route?" a woman asked as she leaned across her flower cart to gossip with a neighboring vendor. "Central Square, for sure," the man replied confidently. "That's where they've built the main stage. It's tradition, isn't it? The dragon greets the 12th Elder from the high steps, then they start the ceremonial dance and fireworks." Another voice chimed in, a tall guard laughing with his partner at the corner tavern. "The procession starts at the northern gate, comes down Hawkspire Avenue, cuts across Riverbend Lane, passes Sunsteps Market, and ends at Central Square. Same route as 32 years ago, when Dragon Noah participated in the Autumn Festival." Dupravel's stride didn't falter, but his ears locked onto that sequence like a vice. "So it starts at Northern Gate, then Hawkspire, Riverbend, Sunsteps, before finally ending at Central Square. Got it," he thought, as he drifted into a narrow alley as if pulled by curiosity, but once alone, he stepped into the shadows and closed his eyes for a moment, mentally reconstructing the city map he had memorized during his infiltration. Each named location lit up in his mind like pieces on a chessboard. Hawkspire Avenue. Too broad, too many guards, and too many sightlines. Riverbend Lane. Good corners, narrow angles, but far too crowded with locals and impossible to control. Sunsteps Market. Better. The stairs created elevation. The roofs nearby offered solid angles. And the congestion here, if manipulated properly, could be weaponized. Dupravel opened his eyes. That was the spot. He made his way toward Sunsteps Market with renewed focus, weaving through shortcut alleys and back lanes, until he arrived at the 3-tiered stairway plaza overlooking the vendor strip. The place was already being decorated with lanterns and cloth banners. He studied every detail. The rooftops of nearby buildings. The blind spots in patrol movement. The merchant carts that could conceal traps. The crowd flow and where it would bottleneck. The slope of the stairs and how someone might tumble if pushed just right. He imagined it all and the two from every angle. Then came the planning. Step 1. Distraction. He would create chaos at the market entrance. A firework cart tipping over. Or better yet, a small explosion. Harmless enough not to trigger a lockdown, but loud enough to draw guards away from the procession path. That was his opening signal. Step 2. Crowded surge. He would time it just as the procession reached the midpoint of Sunsteps. With the guards' attention pulled toward the plaza's edge, the formation around the dragon would loosen. That would be the precise window he needed to move. Step 3. The kill. He would take the height advantage. One of the awnings, or more preferably, the roof of the spice shop on the eastern stairs. From there, he would have a clean shot at Vare's collarbone using a poison-dipped throwing blade. Aimed to disable, not kill immediately. That would buy him enough time to approach the boy himself and finish the job properly. Step 4. Safe retreat. He ruled out a rooftop escape. Too obvious. Instead, he would fall back through the sewer grate near the far fountain, already loosened earlier that day to avoid delays. It would be quick, clean, and untraceable. He had done this before. Too many times to count. Everything was accounted for. Dupra crouched near the edge of the spice shop's roof, now lightly disguised as a visiting clerk. He ran the plan through his mind again, removing variables, identifying weaknesses. Wind speed. Guard rotations. Civilian interference. Mana detection spells. He had answers for all of it. He always did. This wasn't a reckless murder. It was an act of surgical retribution. If everything goes right, the crowd will scream, the guards will scatter, and by the time they realize what happened, the new dragon will already be bleeding out in his own parade. If I pull this off, I will finally have my life back. I will finally have a chance to have my son back. And this time, I will find a way to bring him back, no matter what. Dupra thought, as he let out a resolute sigh. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Chapter 481, Fake It Till You Make It. Planet Vorthas, capital city, one day before the autumn festival. Valtary walked the procession route for the third time that afternoon, his cloak dusted with ash from the spice carts and his boots scuffed from the uneven stone of Riverbend Lane. Every corner he passed, every awning he glanced up at, every vendor he observed unpacking festival goods, he took mental notes of all of it. Vare's training was currently being held in a secure facility under the 12th Elder's direct authority, which meant he wasn't allowed anywhere near it. So instead, Valtary did the only thing he could: prepare for tomorrow. He had no illusions about the danger. The new dragon wasn't just a symbol. He was a target. A walking bounty mark with the bloodline of an ancient enemy, paraded openly through the capital's most crowded district. Valtary ground his teeth. Who thought a public appearance during a festival was a good idea? From the northern gate to Hawkspire Avenue, then Riverbend Lane, he traced every part of the path. Most zones were manageable, guard rotations could be tripled, rooftops could be blocked off, and mana sensors could be calibrated. But then came the Sunsteps market. The moment he stepped into the three-tiered plaza, he knew. This was the problem. Vendors packed shoulder to shoulder. Banners draped across rooftops. Lanterns swaying in the breeze. Kids darting between stalls. Slopes and stairs and pockets of blind spots at every level. Too many places to hide a weapon. Too many points of elevation. Too many civilians to monitor. He stood there a while, arms crossed, as he watched the evening crowd swell. That was when he made the call. "I want extra security in the market," he told the local police captain, his tone sharp and clipped. "Triple the usual patrols. I also want the crowd movement restricted." A brief pause. "And no double rows. I don't care if the locals complain, don't let too many people line up behind each other. If we can't see the hands of those in the backlines, we're sitting blind. A guard on the other end tried to mumble something about tradition and public visibility, but Valtary cut him off. The dragon's safety is not a joke. He turned in place, scanning the surrounding buildings again, this time with narrowed eyes. Slanted rooftops with clean throwing angles. Stalls that could be toppled to cause confusion. Loose grates near the fountain. He hated this. All of it. They were inviting an attack, not preventing one. And the worst part was, even with every countermeasure in place, even with the cult's best men on duty, Valtary still didn't feel safe. Not when the righteous faction and everyone allied with them wanted the new dragon dead. Especially with how just one assassin slipping through could potentially turn tomorrow's celebration into a bloodbath. While Valtary stewed in paranoia over tomorrow's threat, elsewhere, Ver and Leo winded down for the night, as they quietly made their way back from the secret training facility, towards the bustle of civilization, aboard a hovercraft. It was the night before the autumn festival and the 12th Elder had finally dismissed them both, permitting them to rest before reporting for their respective duties the next morning. Leo sat relaxed, one leg propped over the other, arms crossed, his gaze distant yet calm, while Ver sat opposite him, leaning forward with both elbows resting on his knees, his body language betraying a restless tension he couldn't quite shake. He kept stealing glances at Leo, as if debating whether or not to speak, his fingers twitching slightly with hesitation, until Leo finally raised an eyebrow and asked him directly, "What is it?" That broke the dam. "You know, cousin," Ver began, his voice lower than usual, his tone slower, more deliberate, "back at the arena, when you said you don't feel like you're the right fit to be the dragon, most days, I feel the same." He paused for a second, taking a breath. "When they ask me to wave, to smile, to show up and be this shining figure in front of a crowd, I feel like a fraud. Like I'm playing a part someone else was supposed to fill." As he said that, his shoulders sank, and his gaze dropped to the floor, as though saying it out loud only made the weight heavier. "I mean, I know what they expect of me tomorrow," Ver continued, his voice dropping lower. "They want speeches and smiles and hope, they want some inspiring symbol, but I'm not that guy. I never was." He paused for a second, then let out a slow breath. "I've taken lives. Not in battle. Not with honor. The 4th Elder handed me targets, righteous faction spies, criminals, insurgents, some barely older than us. And I obeyed without question. Their souls became fuel. Fast power. Easy strength. That's what built me. Not destiny. Not heroism. And now they want to parade me like I'm some chosen savior, when all I've ever been is a weapon that got lucky. I was never meant to be the dragon." Leo didn't blink. He just let the words settle in the air, letting them hang there long enough to be heard but not pitied. Before finally shrugging them off. "Fine," he said casually, as if none of it surprised him. "I'll teach you a secret mantra, but you can't tell anyone." Ver blinked, caught off guard. "Oh." Leo leaned in slightly, voice hushed, eyes gleaming with mock seriousness as he added weight to the moment. "It's a powerful mantra. Ancient. Passed down only to the deadliest of lunatics." Ver gave a half laugh, unsure if Leo was being serious but still curious. "And what happens if I master it?" Leo grinned, tapping his temple. "Then you can become anyone you want. See, I've got a crazy alternate personality too. He's cold, calculated, kind of terrifying actually. But he's not really me. He's just who I aspire to be all the time." He leaned closer, dramatic pause in place. "The secret mantra is, fake it till you make it, cuz." Ver blinked, then scoffed in disbelief. "Seriously?" "Dead serious," Leo replied, smirking as he leaned back again. "Doesn't matter if you don't feel like the dragon. As long as you keep faking it, keep walking like you are, keep carrying that weight like you belong under it, one day you'll realize you're not pretending anymore." Ver was quiet for a while after that. Then, slowly, he looked out the window at the distant lights of the capital beginning to flicker on in the dusk. "Fake it till you make it, huh? Works better than you think," Leo said. And besides, who else will they have as their dragon? Surely you're a better choice than me. That finally made Ver laugh. Not forced. Not guarded. Just genuine. As he slowly felt his trust in Leo grow stronger. Chapter 482, Tension. Planet Vorthas, Hangar Bay area, early morning. Leo arrived at the hangar bay with a half-yawn still lingering on his face, his boots clicking against the steel floor as the ramp lights guided his path toward the awaiting vessel bound for Juxta. He had expected a silent, uneventful ride, maybe some closed-eye rest en route, until a uniformed soldier intercepted him near the boarding ramp. "Sir Skyshard," the soldier said, straightening to attention, "you're not flying out just yet. Commander Charles issued new orders. You have been asked to return to your family at once." Leo's brow raised slightly. "Why?" "Apparently your family made contact a few days ago," the soldier replied. "Your elder brother, he's awake. Luke Skyshard regained consciousness around 4 days back." Leo froze. His mind blinked. And then, as the words settled in, his emotions flared. A soft blue aura began to envelope his body, as he broke out in a wide grin. "He's awake?" he asked again, this time slower, quieter, as if confirming it aloud would make it real. "Yes, sir. The guards stationed at your house have all confirmed it through direct transmission." Huff. A breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding slipped free, followed by the most excited rubbing of palms he had done in recent memory. "I see," he muttered, then nodded, more to himself than the soldier. "Convey my apologies to the pilot, but I won't be flying to Juxta today. Hell, I wouldn't miss this for the world." His tone was steady, but his steps turned lighter as he pivoted and made a run for the hovercraft shuttles. He needed to get home as soon as possible. He needed to give his brother a good warm hug. Dash. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the capital city, morning of the autumn festival. The scent of sweetbread and wood polish floated through the early streets, as thousands of citizens spilled out of their homes, dressed in layered silks, painted face masks, and ceremonial sashes. From the northern gate to Central Square, the capital city seemed to have come alive. Children ran through alleys with dragon masks too big for their heads. Vendors rolled carts covered in fruit carvings, dyed cloth, and glittering incense braids. Roofs were adorned with flags bearing the cult's crest, newly minted, but waved with pride all the same. The Dragon Army's new recruits, most of them locals who had signed up to join the Dragon on his future raids, stood tall in their polished gear as they rehearsed their synchronized demonstration for later in the day. What began as a simple vow of allegiance had spiraled into a full-blown spectacle of combat formations, illusion spells and mid-air salutes that were all choreographed down to perfection. Still, they weren't the only ones with plans. The common folk had arranged surprises of their own. Near Sunsteps Market, a group of elderly actors from the People's Theater were rehearsing a skit reenacting the legendary liberation of Vorthas by Dragon Noah, complete with wooden swords, handmade horns, and a child actor playing a very enigmatic 12th elder. Across from them, another troupe was preparing a short scene titled, "The Day of Two Gods," meant to honor the time when Lord Sorin repelled a divine invasion all by himself, that was clearly over the top, but met with no less enthusiasm. Further down the path, cultural dancers from the western provinces were tying silk bands and warming up barefoot in the plaza, while musicians tuned hand drums and glowing flutes under shaded stalls. And as for the finale, fireworks were arranged to light up the skies with the cult's sigil, being scheduled to erupt once the parade reached Central Square. Vorthas hadn't seen a celebration this large in over 3 decades. And for many of the people here, it wasn't just about Ver. It was about faith, about hope, about finally feeling like the cult's rule wasn't just suffering dressed in scripture. For today was the day they celebrated with their new messiah. Today was the day they felt their pride returning to the streets once more. Meanwhile Ver and Valtary, with the parade scheduled to begin in under an hour, Ver was quickly dressed in the red ceremonial robes assigned to the dragon. A high-collared mantle settled over his shoulders, stitched with golden patterns, while a half-cape bearing the cult's insignia hung from his side. He stood still as the attendants clipped the final clasp, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable, looking every bit like a storybook hero forced into reality. I can barely move my arms in this thing, and forget about rotating my hips. It's too stiff, Vare muttered, shifting uncomfortably, while Valtary stood behind him in silence, gaze steady, concern barely hidden behind his usual stoicism. If it were up to him, Vare would never step out dressed in robes that made it harder to defend himself, but the choice was not his to make. The 12th Elder had personally selected the outfit to mirror his own, and Valtary had no room to object. Still, even setting the robes aside, there was something deeper gnawing at him. A quiet unease that refused to let go. He said nothing, offered no comment, just kept one hand close to his sword, senses sharp, instincts on edge. Something about today felt wrong. Today's festival was too exposed, too loud, too unpredictable. But the nature and challenge of today's event did not change his job. No matter what came, he had to protect the dragon. Even if it meant dying for it. Lord Vare, if you're ready, can you please proceed downstairs to the common hall? The 12th Elder wishes for you to meet the members of the local union leaders. They will be riding the festivities chariot alongside you today. An attendant requested, as Vare sighed and acquiesced to the request. This was his life now. If he wasn't training, he was being dragged from one meeting to the next, because that too was part of what it meant to be the dragon. Chapter 483, The Parade Begins. Vare wore a smile that did not quite reach his eyes, as he sat stiffly in a high-backed chair while half a circle of union leaders spoke excitedly around him. His gaze flickered from one face to the next, but he said little, nodding when expected, smiling when necessary, offering the occasional hum of acknowledgement when someone leaned in with a particularly enthusiastic update. The Blacksmith Union is 100% ready to support the Dragon's army, 12th Elder. The moment they need us, my men are willing to work non-stop, day or night, to meet production quota. We've already started expanding the arable land under our control, another leader chimed in, straightening his tunic. More and more hectares are being reclaimed from the wild forests. If the weather holds and the new irrigation channels go in on time, our production numbers should rise by 10 to 15% next year. Their voices blended together, plans, promises, pledges, they were all spoken with unwavering pride and patriotic fire. But to Vare, it all felt strangely distant. He sat like a polished statue at the center of it all. Not knowledgeable enough to contribute. Not lucky enough to be excused. It wasn't that he disliked them. Just that none of this was what he had trained for. He was a warrior. His job was supposed to be war. But currently it was anything but war. Numbers and hectares and supply chains meant little to him on a personal level. But still, he listened. Because the dragon was supposed to listen. Because that too was a part of the role. My lord, it's time. The celebration chariot is ready. A soft voice pulled his attention, as a servant bowed before the 12th Elder, who gave a silent nod from behind his masked helm, rising slowly to his feet. He didn't speak, just gestured calmly for the rest of them to follow. Vare stood without a word, motion stiff beneath the weight of his robes, as Valtary fell into step behind him. The union leaders followed shortly after, adjusting their sashes and straightening their posture as if preparing to be seen by history. Together, they exited the common hall and made their way to the towering platform that awaited them outside. The celebration chariot, a moving ceremonial stage, built like a grand transport vessel, open-roofed with golden railings and deep red banners billowing from all sides. It looked like something pulled from myth and dressed in festival light. Vare ascended the platform, joined by the 12th Elder, Valtary, the Elder's personal guards, and all 9 union leaders, each of them finding their place on the upper deck. The engine stirred, and slowly, the chariot began to move, its wheels rolling past the iron gates of the 12th Elder's private quarters and emerging onto the main procession route where thousands had gathered. And that was when the crowd spotted him. The dragon, as the roar that followed was instant and deafening. Cheers, screams, enthusiastic cheers erupted like thunder from the throats of every commoner gathered as the parade ignited in earnest, with Vare standing tall at its heart. Flower petals flew through the air in bursts of color as entire families surged toward the barricades, elbowing for a better view, some hoisting children up on shoulders while others simply wept with joy at the sight. Old women clutched prayer beads and bowed with hands trembling, whispering blessings meant for a generation they never thought they'd live to see. Young men shouted war chants with voices hoarse from pride, as they vowed to drink till they passed out every time the dragon claimed a new planet for the cult. Shopkeepers abandoned their stalls just to catch a glimpse of the dragon. Artists sketched furiously from rooftops, trying to immortalize the moment. As pretty much everywhere that the chariot rolled, it felt like a dream colliding with reality. To most here, this was a once-in-a-lifetime sight. A holy figure not seen through a broadcast or told through story, but breathing, waving, standing less than 50 feet away. Vare smiled. He waved. He nodded with the poise of a leader born into destiny. But inside, his thoughts churned like stormwater beneath calm glass. Was this how being the dragon was supposed to feel? He saw their eyes, filled with awe. Their mouths, wide open with belief. Their cheers, deafening in their sincerity. And yet, he couldn't silence the thought that clung to the back of his throat like a stone. They think I'm someone I'm not. They believe in me this much even though I have done nothing to earn it. His lips never stopped smiling, his hand never dropped, but behind every perfect gesture was a silent whisper to himself. Fake it till you make it, there. Just keep faking it, and maybe one day, it won't feel fake anymore. Behind him, Valtary stood with one hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword, eyes sharp and scanning. He didn't share in the joy. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. Every time someone leaned in too far. Every time a crowd member surged too fast. Every time a glint of metal flashed in the light, his grip would tighten and his muscles would coil, ready to strike. But he didn't. Because none of those false alarms were actually enemies. Just pious citizens who had gone a bit crazy upon seeing the dragon. I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. I told the local guards again and again that they must not allow double lines to form, but there is no order to this crowd. This is a security nightmare through and through, he muttered, as he grit his teeth in anger. And yet, for all his frustration, he didn't act on impulse. Couldn't afford to. Because in a setting like this, drawing his blade even once would cause chaos that could spiral far beyond control. So he kept breathing, kept watching. Because whether he liked it or not, he was the final shield between the dragon and anyone who wished to cause him harm. And there was no room for mistakes. Chapter 484, Alive and Home. Meanwhile, the Skyshard Mansion. At the same time that the parade began, Leo pushed open the door to Luke's medical room with a wide grin already forming on his face. Click. From the moment he had arrived back at the Skyshard Mansion, his body had started to move faster than his thoughts, as he could almost not wait a single second longer to see his brother awake again. Step. Step. As he stepped inside, his subconscious brain registered the atmosphere of the room and how it looked serene with the sun blinds half open. However, his active brain did not pay attention to such trivialities. Because sitting there, propped up against a stack of pillows with a blanket tucked over his waist and a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, sat his brother, very much conscious, very much alive, and unmistakably himself. Took you long enough, Luke said with a lopsided grin, his eyes locking onto Leo's as if nothing had changed between them. Yeah, Leo replied, practically stumbling into the chair beside him as his grin stretched even wider, teeth showing, eyes gleaming, the kind of expression only family could bring out in him. How bad's the pain? Can you move? Are you fine under all that gauze? He asked quickly, pointing at Luke's bandaged torso as he leaned in, voice rising with excitement. You can hug me, Luke approved, cutting through the concern before it even had time to take shape, already knowing exactly what Leo had been leading up to. Hug. Without another word, Leo threw his arms around him, burying his face into his brother's chest with the full weight of someone who had waited too long for this moment, while Luke let out a wheezing cough and a soft laugh as the air left his lungs in one short burst. Oye, calm down, I'm still healing, you idiot, Luke muttered between chuckles, wincing slightly as Leo only hugged him tighter. I missed you, Leo said, his voice trembling, as Luke gently placed his hand over his brother's back and patted him till he was calm. Secretly, Luke felt the same way as Leo. Scared, relieved, happy, vulnerable. However, outwardly, he did not let it show. He was the elder brother after all, and hence, appearing vulnerable before his sibling was something he could never bring himself to show. It's fine. I'm going to be fine. I'm a powerful Grandmaster, just like you, Luke said, as he flexed how he had broken through to Grandmaster just before he had passed out, only for Leo to scoff at that remark. Back when he and Luke were just gamers grinding in Terra Nova Online, Grandmaster had felt like the ultimate peak of strength, a rank so impossibly high that nobody they knew could even hope to actually reach it. The strongest NPC in the entire game was a Grandmaster tier dragon, and it was practically invincible, a behemoth capable of wiping out entire cities without taking a scratch. At the time, the two of them used to joke that if they ever hit Grandmaster, they'd split the game world in half, ruling each side with iron fists and achieving total domination. But those turned out to be nothing more than the naive dreams of kids who didn't yet understand how weak the Grandmaster tier actually was in the real universe. Because once they left the simulation and stepped into the actual world, they realized the bitter truth: Grandmaster wasn't even considered elite in the greater cosmic power scale, and that those who sat at Grandmaster level were little more than bottom feeders in the eyes of the truly strong. Well, you are strong, brother. There is no doubt in my mind about that, Leo admitted, as he gently tapped Luke on the shoulder, causing Luke to grin even wider from the compliment. You're not too bad yourself, circuit champion. I saw you entertaining quite the crowd while I was on the run from the Red Army. You made me proud, Luke said, his voice enthusiastic, as Leo raised an eyebrow at the mention of the Red Army. The Red Army, he repeated, his brows furrowing, as the name rang a bell somewhere in the back of his mind. He remembered hearing about them back at the Rodova Military Academy when a group of students were discussing the evil cult in the cafeteria. According to his memory, the Red Army was a specialized military division under the Universal Government, formed for one purpose, and one purpose alone, which was to hunt down cult operatives on the run. Nicknamed the Cult Hunters, they were a relentless elite unit of trackers and killers who were infamous for chasing their targets for years if needed, never stopping until they succeeded in eliminating them. Brother, how did you even cross paths with the Red Army? Weren't you supposed to be training under the cult's protection? Leo asked, his voice sharper now, as Luke visibly winced, as though the very question struck a nerve. I was training for the cult. Luke muttered, his voice strained and uncertain, as a dull ache bloomed in his head, growing worse the longer he tried to think about it. I don't really remember how I got involved with the Red Army, to be honest. It's all still a bit blurry in my head, Luke said, his voice low and thoughtful. But what I do remember is being hunted, relentlessly, for nearly a year. He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. No matter how far I ran, they always found a way to close in. I lived a life filled with horrors, Leo, the kind you can't explain. There wasn't a single night I could sleep in peace without the fear that I'd be assassinated in my bed. Not a single meal I could finish without wondering if staying in one place too long would lead to me being tracked and ambushed. His eyes darkened slightly, the memory clearly weighing heavily on his mind. It was a rough time. There were more than a few moments where I genuinely believed I wouldn't make it out alive, he said, the last part almost a whisper, as Leo squeezed his shoulders tightly, reassuring him that it was okay. I mean, you survived, brother, and now you're back home. Leo said with a reassuring smile, as Luke smiled back at him. Yes, that's true. I am alive. And I am home. Chapter 485, Doubts. Leo ended up chatting with Luke for a couple more hours, as the two brothers laughed, reminisced, and caught up on all the lighthearted things they hadn't been able to share over the past few years. Luke, for his part, felt nothing but pride as he listened to Leo recount his journey, especially when he saw the kind of home Leo had secured for their family, complete with high-end architecture, top-grade medical care, and security systems that rivaled military bases. Leo for his part though, did not take any of that praise too seriously. What truly occupied his mind were the fragments of Luke's story, specifically the parts about his life on the run from the Red Army. Luke never explained it directly, yet whenever he casually referenced the horrors he'd endured, Leo quietly paid attention and did his best to read between the lines. Something about Luke's story did not add up in his brain, as no matter how hard he tried to accept it all at face value, the details seemed to be too off to be true. Luke seemed to be unsure of which planets he'd been chased through, often skipping over key details or speaking in generalities. He also described his pursuers as mostly Master, or Grandmaster, level agents, but Leo couldn't help feeling skeptical about that. After all, the Red Army was known for deploying specialized trackers and high-tier assassins, so it did not seem possible that they chased him for a year, yet never introduced someone higher than a Grandmaster in the picture. Still, he said nothing out loud. He did not want to risk stressing Luke further while he was still recovering. And more importantly, he knew Luke wasn't lying. There was no black aura around him when he spoke, so at least what he said was what he best believed to be true. But even so, the whole story still smelled off. And Leo knew he needed to investigate more about what actually happened without raising alarms. Once Leo was done chatting with Luke, he made his way downstairs to the living room, where the rest of the family had gathered around the TV, watching the live broadcast of the ongoing Dragon Parade. "So, how was it? Did you two catch up?" Elena asked, her eyes lit with excitement, as Leo gave a small nod in return. "Yeah, we caught up," he replied with a warm smile, as he settled down between Ben and Jacob, around the man's side of the living room area. "Father, we need to talk," he said in a serious voice while leaning forward on his knees as he spoke while glancing toward the television. "Something about Luke's recollection of what happened doesn't sit right with me," he said in a hushed tone, careful not to disturb the women who were still focused on the parade. "Oh," Jacob responded, his brow rising ever so slightly. "It's next to impossible for anyone without proper training to evade the Red Army for more than a year," Leo began, keeping his tone thoughtful and measured. "But what makes even less sense is him saying that he was being pursued by Master and Grandmaster level agents. That part in particular. I just don't buy it. If the Red Army truly flagged him because of his lineage, they would have sent a transcendent level operative to eliminate the threat outright. And even if they didn't deploy one immediately, the fact that he apparently survived more than 3 months on the run should have triggered an escalation in response. By then, they definitely would have sent someone stronger." He leaned back against the couch, folding his arms as his gaze drifted back to the screen. "Something about the whole story feels off. So over the next few days, try to gather as many details as you can from Luke, casually, while talking. Piece it together slowly," Leo added, his voice now softer, as Jacob gave a slight nod, understanding the assignment without the need for further explanation. And with that, Leo relaxed into his seat like the rest of them, eyes shifting back toward the broadcast, as if nothing serious had just been discussed at all. Mu Fan sat alone inside a dark room, lit only by the soft blue glow of half a dozen floating screens that flickered quietly around her. Her chair creaked slightly as she leaned forward, one hand adjusting the frequency dial on the surveillance panel, the other resting on her temple, fingers tapping against her skull in faint agitation. And then it came. Leo's voice. Quiet, serious, but unmistakably sharp. Her eyes narrowed. She sat up straighter as the conversation between Leo and Jacob played out through the embedded microphone planted discreetly inside Ben's ear implant, one that the elder had planted specifically to spy on the Skyshard family. At first, she listened without emotion, but as Leo's words turned more detailed, more precise, her breath caught. By the time he uttered, "So over the next few days, try to gather as many details as you can from Luke," she was already on her feet. Her fingers darted across the holographic keyboard, pulling up the internal alert system. "Shit," she muttered under her breath, eyes flicking toward the timestamped transcript as her pulse began to race. "I told those idiots that messing with Leo's family was a catastrophic idea, but no. The elder never listens. She stared at the screen, jaw tight, heart hammering inside her chest as she felt that creeping, suffocating sensation she always got right before things spiraled beyond recovery. He doesn't buy the Red Army story anymore. He's already onto us. If he keeps digging, she whispered, trailing off. The air around her grew cold. A sharp, biting premonition surged through her chest, crawling up her spine like an electric shiver. Something bad was coming. And if they didn't move now, if they didn't cover their tracks before Leo pieced it all together. She didn't finish the thought. Instead, she transmitted a high-priority alert to her secured channel. Code Black. Subject Leo Skyshard has begun post-reconstruction inference. Family narrative compromised. Immediate containment protocol to be prepared. Recommend scenario reevaluation and potential memory anchor distortion. Requesting tactical guidance from the Elder. The message sent. Mu Fan stood in the darkness, silent now, as the soft hum of the surveillance equipment continued to buzz faintly in the background. This wasn't going to end clean. And she could feel it. Chapter 486, Approaching Sunsteps Market. Meanwhile, the Autumn Festival Parade. The chariot carrying Ver reached the entryway to Sunsteps Market without encountering the slightest disruption, its progress through the preceding 3 sectors having lulled many into a false sense of ease. By this point, the 12th Elder's guards, once rigid and alert, began to relax visibly, their shoulders less tense, their formations slightly looser, as if the festive ambiance had gradually seeped into their discipline. They no longer reacted to the sudden bursts of confetti that occasionally rained from above. Nor did they seem particularly interested in admonishing the children who darted beside the dragon's chariot with gleaming eyes and carefree smiles, each one treating the procession as if it were a passing miracle. From a security standpoint it was a big lapse, however, with such a large crowd, it became difficult to control every small aspect. Since there had been no major incidents so far, the other guards started to let their vigilance down just a little. But not Valtary. Valtary did not loosen his stance, nor did his gaze ever truly settle, as his caution only deepened with each passing second, especially now that they were closing in on Sunsteps Market. Unlike the 12th Elder's men who had begun soaking in the revelry, Valtary remained firmly rooted in vigilance, his expression unreadable and his posture tight, as though he were expecting danger to rise from behind every shadow. Here at the Sunsteps Market, rows of tightly packed spectators lined both sides of the street, forming a corridor of eager faces, each one tilted toward the grand chariot that housed both the dragon and the Elder. Their eyes sparkled with anticipation, the kind that children wore when they neared the climax of a fable they had heard 100 times and still adored. Screech. The chariot rolled to a sudden halt just as its front reached the heart of the square. The citizens have prepared a surprise play for you, hope you like it, the 12th Elder murmured into Ver's ear, his tone laced with pride, just as the first thunderous beat of ceremonial drums crashed through the open air. DHUM. DDRUM. A wave of performers, clad in fitted crimson armor, sprang into the center of the square with precision and energy, their movements choreographed to near perfection, while the crowd's attention shifted as one, drawn like iron to a magnet. This was the play of Vorthas, a commemorative reenactment of the famed liberation of planet Vorthas, where Noah, the previous dragon, had supposedly led a mere 1,000,000 soldiers against an enemy force twice that size. The actors wasted no time in hurling themselves into exaggerated action, limbs flailing in dramatic combat, voices raised in passionate declarations that bordered on parody. Oversized swords gleamed under illusion magic, illusory pyres flickered with controlled bursts of light, and every enemy that fell did so with guttural cries and writhing spasms, as though slain by fate itself rather than choreography. Some spectators cheered, others chuckled at the dramatics. Most clapped in time with the rhythm, not necessarily for the performance, but out of sheer politeness, as Ver chuckled and enjoyed the over-the-top acting. He could imagine how this was what the cult members would expect him to do very soon, and in a way, he laughed at his own future. DDRUM. DHADUM. The beat of the drum suddenly changed, as from the far end of the street, came a second ensemble, this one made up of older men, their forms wrapped in flowing robes and powdered wigs, as they stepped into the fray with a solemnity that suggested that the next act would be serious business. The second act is them showing Lord Sorin's greatness. The 12th Elder whispered, as a second play began, this one showing how Sorin had once stood atop a cliff and repelled 2 invading gods by unleashing celestial fire from each hand. That was how the story had been told to the cult. However, Ver seriously doubted that a fight between gods could ever look so simple. The 2 towering puppets meant to represent the enemy gods stumbled and clashed in awkward cadence, their heads disproportionately massive, their movements restricted by their oversized limbs. Meanwhile, Sorin's character dangled from a barely stable wire rig above them, floating shakily in midair as he mimed his spells with wild, theatrical gestures, casting fireballs that exploded into harmless puffs of light. Those are the legendary flames of judgment. One actor cried, lifting his arms dramatically. No, that's the meteor destroyer. Another shouted, almost tripping over his robe. The crowd responded with hearty laughter, not out of reverence for the story but because of how flamboyantly ridiculous the portrayal had become. Children squealed with delight. Parents exchanged amused glances. Even a few guards allowed themselves brief chuckles as their eyes drifted between the ridiculous display and the surrounding rooftops, ever so slightly more relaxed now than before. Above the square, removed from the celebration and completely unseen, Dupra remained still. He crouched low along the curved spine of a weather-beaten roof, balancing effortlessly atop a forgotten alchemy shop, the dust barely shifting beneath his boots. From his vantage point, he could see everything: the dragon's chariot, the crowd, the guards, the play. And yet, not a single soul below so much as sensed his existence. There was no aura around him. No breath. No heartbeat. Even the mana sensors embedded in the perimeter failed to detect anything beyond static air. His presence was muted, suppressed entirely, like a phantom who had never been born. For fuck's sake, if these fools can get a move on faster. Dupra thought frustratingly, as he couldn't believe how the procession came to a grinding halt for such a stupid play. The dragon's chariot had not yet reached the precise tile he had marked for assassination. And until it did, all he could do was wait. The moment this parade resumes and the chariot reaches the spice shop, I will launch the fireworks first. The sudden burst of explosions and noise will draw the attention of the guards upward, forcing their eyes and focus away from the streets, which will give me the perfect opening to push a few old men onto the street and trigger a commotion. With the chaos undoubtedly forcing the chariot to come to a screeching halt. Dupra thought, as he mentally rehearsed the steps of his plan one final time. Once the chariot is stalled and panic over the misfired fireworks grips the crowd, I will make my move. I will paralyze the dragon with a poisoned dagger, swift and silent, and then teleport directly beside him to finish the job myself. His fingers tightened around the cold hilt of the dagger in one hand, while the other held a small glass vial containing the strength-reversing potion. He stared at both for a moment longer, silently bracing himself for the moment he would need to shatter the bottle and down its contents, returning his strength back to monarch tier, so that he could take down his opponent without any unexpected problems. For this mission, timing was everything. And when the moment came, Dupra wanted to strike with no hesitation, leaving behind nothing but silence and blood in his wake. Chapter 487, A Face from the Past. Once the 2 plays ended, the dragon's chariot rolled forward once again, its golden wheels creaking softly over the cobbled stone, as Ver smiled and clapped heartily for the performers, his approval evident in the way he nodded toward the crowd, acknowledging their efforts with the charisma expected of someone holding the post of the cult's messiah. Valtary, however, did not share in the applause. His eyes flicked across the market square, past the thinning performers and the slowly parting crowd, as he scanned each rooftop and shaded alley as though they concealed ghosts. The tension that had curled in his chest before the plays had only grown tighter now that it was over, and though the road ahead appeared calm, something about the silence felt dangerous to him, like the hush before a storm no one had been told to expect. Boom, crackle, whiz. It happened all of a sudden. The first explosion came from the left, from a small back alley nestled behind a row of spice stalls, and before Valtary could turn his head, a second blast split the air from the opposite end of the street. Firecrackers seemed to be bursting in all directions, not in orchestrated arcs of beauty, but in erratic bursts that flew into shop windows, ricocheted off rooftops, and spun wildly into the sky, where they burst with ear-rattling shrieks. The entire street flinched. Civilians gasped. Children shrieked. "What the?" one of the guards near Valtary muttered, already rushing toward the alley. "Were these supposed to go off now?" Another questioned, pulling out a baton as a group of local policemen darted past the chariot to contain the chaos. "These pyromancers," an elderly man in the crowd spat, pulling his grandchild behind him, "they have one job. One job. I hope it doesn't inconvenience the dragon," whispered another, craning his neck for a glimpse of Vare's reaction, who seemed calm and unbothered by the chaos. Boom. Whiz. Because of the explosions, the crowd began to shift uneasily, their instincts drawing them closer together in tight huddled lines that placed them as far away from danger as possible. The noise alone was enough to split the concentration of the guards, but it was the suddenness of it all that seemed to take everyone by surprise. It was all too erratic. Too close. Roll. Stumble. Fall. Somewhere near the front, just ahead of the chariot's path, a cluster of citizens suddenly fell, toppling past the flimsy ropes that separated the crowd from the main road, their limbs flailing as two men and an elderly woman collapsed into the procession's lane. Screech. The chariot ground to a screeching halt, the wheels jolting Vare slightly forward on his seat. I'm sorry, my lord," one man cried, clutching his broken arm as he scrambled to his feet. "Someone pushed me. I didn't mean to fall, I swear." Guards rushed to pull the civilians back, helping them off the road, but their attention was all drawn to the wrong place. Every head turned toward the injured man. Every hand moved to lift the fallen. Every voice shouted commands to restore order. Except Valtary's. Valtary stood frozen, his instincts screaming louder than the fireworks, louder than the crowd, louder than the guards yelling over each other. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. He scanned the buildings again, his eyes darting rapidly, searching for anything, any glint, any flash, any movement that could explain this heavy pulse of dread thudding in his chest. And then he saw it. Just for a fraction of a second, in the corner of a reflection on a windowpane above the alchemy shop, he caught it. A shimmer of motion, a blade glinting unnaturally as it tore through the air, aimed not at the sky, not at the civilians, but directly at the dragon's neck. And then everything slowed. His body moved before his mind could fully grasp it. "Get down, my lord," he roared, lunging sideways. As his arm cut across Vare's throat just as the blade arrived. Slash! A searing, molten pain shot up through his forearm as the poisoned dagger sank clean into his palm, its sharp edge ripping through flesh and bone with ease. Splurt! Drip! Blood spurted instantly, warm and thick, splashing onto Vare's robes. But the blade did not reach its target. Vare gasped, his eyes wide, but untouched, as he drew his own concealed blade beneath his ceremonial robes. Buckle! Valtary fell to one knee, hand still wrapped around the embedded dagger, pain tearing through him like wildfire, but all he could think was, "The threat is not yet over." His vision blurred as the poison started its work, but even through the agony, he kept his arm raised, shielding the dragon with what strength he had left, while the 12th Elder's guards screamed and scrambled around him, finally understanding what had just taken place. A highly skilled assassin loomed around them, and he was aiming for the dragon's life. Dash! Dupravel's face turned to one of genuine surprise when Valtary managed to block his dagger. He had thrown the dagger with perfect form. From the arc to the weight to the timing, every part of the throw had been honed through decades of lethal practice. And yet, it hadn't landed. That face. I have seen that man before. Dupravel thought, as in Valtary he saw a reflection of James, the shield of the previous dragon Noah, and a man he had once killed with his own two hands. His brow furrowed ever so slightly as his sharp eyes tracked the scene below, noting the trail of blood splattered across the dragon's ceremonial garb, and the hunched figure of James, clutching his palm around the blade that should have hit its mark. The man's unusual reflexes were not something Dupra had foreseen, but it wasn't enough to rattle him. He was a monarch after all at his peak strength, and even if a couple things unfolded beyond his expectations, he still had the confidence to see the mission through and end the dragon's life. Chapter 488, The Battle Begins. Click. Dupra snapped the vial cap off the strength regeneration potion and downed its contents in one gulp, feeling the familiar surge of strength begin to crawl through his veins, as he slowly regained his true prowess. Just below him, the fools tasked with guarding the new dragon remained oblivious to his location, their eyes darting frantically from rooftop to rooftop, alley to alley, sweeping the entire market square with disciplined urgency, but never quite locking onto the precise spot where he crouched in wait. We must get the dragon and the elder to safety. Move, 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 we're a sitting duck here. We need to relocate to an area we can fortify better, one of the security guards aboard the chariot barked, his voice sharp with urgency as the others fell into formation with practiced instinct, forming a living wall of muscle and armor around the dragon and the elder, as they moved as a unit and gradually inching toward the chariot's edge, their posture clearly preparing for a coordinated disembark to a safer zone. However, unfortunately for them, that was exactly what Dupra had planned for, as slash, slash. Two more poisoned daggers flew from his fingers, his posture fluid as he moved swiftly to a new vantage point using a high-speed traversal technique that blurred his silhouette like a smudge of ink on canvas. Thud, thud, oh shit, there seems to be more than one opponent, the lead guard called out, misreading the trajectory of the daggers and assuming, incorrectly, that multiple assassins were launching simultaneous strikes from different directions. Chaos. Meanwhile, amongst the commoners, panic erupted like wildfire. All around the chariot, the crowd devolved into screaming confusion, unable to grasp what was truly unfolding. Rogue firecrackers were still going off in sporadic bursts, igniting sections of the market street, while at the same time, the dragon himself appeared to be under siege by invisible enemies. Who dares attack the dragon? Coward! Show yourself! An old man on the roadside shouted defiantly, standing tall even in fear. Splurt. A heartbeat later, a dagger pierced through his forehead, his body collapsing like a marionette with its strings cut, as Dupra silenced him without a second thought, simply because he could. Stop crowding me. I can't see jack shit with you guys blocking my line of sight, Ver snapped, his voice clipped and irritated beneath the cloak of calm he usually wore. I appreciate the concern, but if a poisoned blade slips through a small gap in your formation, I'm finished. I would prefer you allow me to fight for myself. I am more than capable. He pleaded, however, his protests fell on deaf ears. Cover the dragon. Protect him at all costs. The lead guard barked again, louder this time, ignoring Ver's words completely, as he and the rest of the 12th Elder's detail tightened their perimeter around him. Shields overlapped and eyes scanned all directions as they finally reached the edge of the chariot, preparing to leap. Lord Dragon, 12th Elder, please prepare to jump at my command, the guard instructed, his voice steady despite the chaos, as he raised one fist in the air, then dropped it in one sharp motion. Now, he urged, as with synchronized precision, the entire entourage vaulted from the chariot to the cobbled street below. However, unfortunately for them, that jump was the exact moment Dupra had been waiting for. As the second he saw them leap, he too sprang into motion. Slash, 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 thud. 4 guards fell mid-descent, their bodies slamming into the ground like meat tossed from a butcher's hook, which left only 2, the lead guard and 1 other, as the last line of defense between Dupra and Ver. Step, step. It was at this moment that Dupra finally revealed himself, as he chose to descend from the rooftop with unhurried menace. Land. Dupra landed before the crowd like a specter born of nightmare, dressed in the signature robes of the Black Serpent Guild, which fluttered faintly under the wind. A curved short sword gleamed in his hand, its black edge soaked with the blood of countless enemies, as he eyed Ver with the gaze of a hungry predator. It's him, it's Monarch Dupra, the Black Serpent Guildmaster. The lead guard shouted, his voice cracking as the words left his throat. As a chill swept the market street. Everyone within the cult had heard of Dupra. Everyone knew what he had done. This was the man who had slain the previous dragon, Noah, and walked away without consequence. This was the man the cult hated as one of its worst enemies. Shing, shing, slash, dodge, slash. Dupra moved like a shadow, eliminating the final two guards in a brutal flurry of blade and smoke, clearing the path to Ver with ruthless efficiency as he blinked between short-range spatial points, his body dissipating and reappearing in clouds of black mist that confounded the eye. What the hell is that movement technique? He's right in front of me, yet I can't tell where he'll appear next. Ver thought, his jaw clenched tight as he clenched his sword tighter, muscles flexing beneath the tight ceremonial robes, as the fabric tore along the seams. Block, parry, slide, their blades clashed, and to Ver's surprise, despite the lethal speed of Dupravel's assault, he somehow managed to intercept the first wave of strikes without a hitch. It seemed as if due to the effects of parallel processing, his mind had split the sensory load across multiple channels, allowing him to read Dupravel's attacks just fast enough to react and defend, as he somehow managed to stand his ground for now. You will not harm Ver. You coward. Now that you have entered cult territory, you're going to pay with your life. The 12th Elder said, as he launched himself into battle, unleashing two powerful wind slashes that forced Dupravel to take a step back. The 12th Elder felt the dam of his suppressed fury finally crack upon seeing Dupravel's face, as a flood of buried rage surged to the surface. He too had history with Dupravel, for he had been there on the day Noah was slain, forced to flee as his closest friend stayed behind, choosing death to ensure their escape. Noir had been weak back then, he had been unable to protect Noah, but ever since that incident, he had been praying for the day when he would get a chance to face Dupravel yet again, for in his head, he had already played this scenario 100 times over, and had a plan to counter the monarch. Chapter 489, Regret. Sunsteps Market, the 12th Elder's POV. There are moments in one's life where they wish they could go back and do things differently. Moments they obsess over quietly, wondering what might have changed had they reacted faster, fought harder, or simply chosen another path. And then there are moments in one's life which they spend years preparing for, mentally rehearsing every word, every motion, hoping that if fate ever brought the scenario back around, they would get it right this time. And this right here, was one such moment for the 12th Elder. Ever since Noah's death, he had replayed that day endlessly, haunted by the image of his best friend staying behind while he fled. Back then, he had no answers, no strategy that could have saved them both. But things were different now. Because now, Dupravel had a glaring weakness that everyone in the universe knew about. His son, Darnell. And that was the one card he did not have 32 years back, when Dupravel was at his savage best. Shift. In an instant, the 12th Elder altered his appearance, transforming into a near-perfect replica of Darnell Nuna, down to the trembling lips and anxious frown. "Dad, are you here to save me?" he asked, voice shaky and laced with panic, mimicking Darnell's tone with terrifying precision. As watching his face, Dupravel froze. Despite having witnessed the transformation, despite knowing with absolute certainty that this could not possibly be his son, that voice and those eyes still landed like a blade between his ribs. "Dad, they put me up there. They tied me beside the dragon like some sort of meat shield. These cult members, they're cruel," the 12th Elder whimpered, layering desperation over every syllable. And Dupravel hesitated, not because he believed it. Not at all. But because in that 1,000th of a second, where logic collided with memory, and instinct was overrun by paternal fear, he couldn't ignore the flicker of possibility, the sliver of doubt, that this might be some sort of elaborate ruse set up by the cult to have him kill his son with his own hands. Grip. His fingers tensed around the hilt of his blade, eyes narrowing in conflict. He knew it wasn't real. He knew it was bait. And yet, he couldn't strike the 12th Elder. So he turned his back on the impersonator and lunged for Ver again, his form disappearing in yet another puff of smoke, as he appeared from irrational pockets of space all around Ver. Shing. Block. Block. To his credit, Ver managed to hold his ground perfectly. Having recently fought a speed demon like Leo, He had been made aware about the lapses in his own defense, and had improved slightly since that bout. And although Dupra came crashing down on him with immense strength, somehow, the force felt manageable to Ver, as if he were fighting against another transcendent tier opponent, and not a monarch. Clash, strike, parry. Over the next 10 seconds, their blades collided again and again, metal screaming against metal as Ver held his ground, deflecting each of Dupravel's precise strikes with a calm focus. The market square had become a war zone, with cracked stone underfoot and a haze of smoke curling through the air like serpents on the prowl. Dupravel fought with the cold ruthlessness of a killer, his blade moving with an eerie grace that made him seem less man and more phantom. He blinked through patches of distorted space, closing gaps and reappearing mid-swing, his short sword singing arcs of death in the air. Yet Ver matched him, barely a step behind, relying not on speed, but on prediction and timing. He didn't need to outspeed Dupravel, only to stay alive long enough for the reinforcements to arrive. Whiz! Boom! A sudden wind shot crashed into the stone by Dupravel's feet, narrowly missing his leg. The 12th Elder, still in Darnell's form, stood a distance away, his palms glowing with residual mana as he hurled another strike toward the monarch, hoping to create just enough distraction for Ver to get in a kill shot. Crack! Deflect! Persistent little rat, Dupravel muttered, glancing toward the Elder without breaking his rhythm, as he spun midair to redirect a falling strike toward Ver's left. You two shall die soon enough. Dupravel claimed, yet he made no move to eliminate the 12th Elder outright. Instead, he focused entirely on Ver, trying his best to somehow decapitate the dragon, yet just as he began to fall into a rhythm, he felt another shot coming for him from the side. Dodge! Swoosh! The 12th Elder's constant interference made it difficult for him to overwhelm Ver's defense, but that wasn't the only reason he struggled. He could feel it, the weakness in his muscles. His breathing felt too shallow. His arms ached more than they should. His strikes didn't carry the bone-breaking weight of a monarch's blow. At this moment in time, he was no stronger than a peak transcendent tier warrior, as despite drinking the potion and initially feeling a surge of strength rushing through his veins, it never actually materialized to him returning to his peak. Did Morris set me up? Dupravel wondered at this moment, as from the corner of his eyes, he noticed some concerning movement. Dozens of guards and reinforcements were closing down on his location. As the longer this battle dragged on, the worse his odds of success became. Damn you, Morris, he hissed under his breath, his voice low and lethal, as he attempted one last Hail Mary at killing Ver, but the dragon blocked it precisely. Clang! Oh damn you, Morris! He roared again, this time louder, as he spat each word with all the venom in his heart. Then, as if realizing that this was a wasted effort, he pulled back and reached into his robe as he hurled a dozen smoke bombs across the battlefield. Pop! Crack! *FSSSH. In an instant, a thick veil of smoke swallowed the entire square, cutting visibility to near zero. Screams echoed as civilians stumbled in panic and the incoming guards halted to regroup. And just like that, Dupravel turned to leave. Slipping into the mist like a shadow, he retreated through the sewer grate prepared in advance with his pride wounded and his rage simmering into something far more dangerous. The mission had failed. The dragon still lived, and worse, he had been tricked. Not by Ver, not by the cult, but by Morris the deceiver. The sly old god had played him like a pawn, and sent him to a certain death, while making false promises of freedom and power. Splat! Splat! Dupravel's boots splashed through shallow sewer water as he fled, his mind drowning louder than his footsteps. How pathetic, he thought, jaw clenched tight. All these years serving them like a dog, all this blood shed in their name, and for what? He blinked, his rage giving way to something colder. I should have joined the cult. I should have lived here with my son. I should have negotiated a deal for my life. It would have been easier than the missions I did for Morris. His grip tightened around his blade's hilt. Instead, I fought for scum like the eternal deceiver. Let pride and vengeance blind me. Let lies shape my path. Ha! A bitter laugh escaped him. Maybe I was the fool all along. Maybe. I still am. Chapter 490, exactly as planned. Meanwhile, back at the Skyshard mansion, Leo watched the chaotic feed with a nonchalant smile plastered across his lips, as he enjoyed the chaos as if watching a movie. Asterisk fizz. Asterisk boom. As the firecrackers went off in the distance, and Elena and Alia panicked at the sudden surprise attack on Ver, Leo only laughed unworried, as he elbowed his father on the side. This is why I chose not to be dragon, he said, as he watched the guards around the 12th Elder drop like flies, looking completely clueless on where the attacks were coming from. What's the matter? These idiots don't know any sensory detection spells. Geez, they teach absolute vision in the first year at Rodova. This is exactly why, Leo commented, as he felt thoroughly disappointed in cult security, which clearly did not know high-tiered perception spells necessary to do their jobs. Thud. Ooh, Leo said, his face scrunching in disgust, as he saw 4 more guards lose their lives at once, leaving Ver nearly defenseless now. The killer is good, whoever it is, their skills are the real deal. He said, as Dupra finally dropped into frame, his black serpent robes fluttering silently in the air. Well, I'll be damned, Leo said, as he looked at Dupra, the monarch looking as menacing as ever. Mom, that's my old boss. I told you I was in the Black Serpents, yeah. That's the guildmaster, Leo said, pointing excitedly towards Dupra, as Elena absent-mindedly nodded. Is he very strong? Will he kill the new dragon? Alia asked at this moment, as Leo shrugged his shoulders in response. Yeah, Ver is fucked, he said, as he felt pity for his cousin who had to face this monster. However, just as he dismissed Ver's death as a foregone conclusion, it was Amanda who reminded him of the consequences of Ver's death, should it actually come to pass. Leo, if Ver dies you become the next dragon. That means, it would be you up on that chariot during the next parade. Amanda reminded, as it was at that moment that Leo realized what was at stake here. Oh hell no. Oh no, no, Leo mumbled as he clutched his hair in panic. Go Ver. Run. Fucking save your life somehow. He cheered, as from that moment onwards, he too began to watch the TV with bitten lips. Up till now, he watched the chaos unfold with complete nonchalance, forgetting that this would be his fate next, should Ver actually die in battle. However, thankfully, such an outcome did not come to pass. Ver managed to hold his own until reinforcements arrived, and in the end Dupra was forced to retreat. He's safe. He managed to fend off a monarch. Elena said once the smoke cleared, as Leo blinked in confusion. On one hand, it could not be refuted that Ver managed to hold his own against Dupra, however, on the other, it did not seem like he was fighting at monarch strength. Interesting, Leo mused, as when he compared the speed and power behind Dupravel's movements to those of Charles. In his head, the movement speeds did not add up, as he felt like something was amiss about this whole episode. Meanwhile Morris watched the entire episode unfold from his home planet on a small crystal ball, as he felt extremely amused when he saw Dupravel curse him right before he fled. Ha 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 ha. He chuckled out loud, as it were moments like these that made eternal life worth living for him, as he derived a sadistic pleasure from deceiving gullible mortals. It will take 20 days for his strength to return to peak monarch tier, not 20 seconds. Let's see if he can survive until then, or if Soren sniffs him out in between, Morris muttered, as he cut off the crystal orb feed and closed his eyes with a satisfied smile. Everything had proceeded exactly how he calculated. The dragon had been attacked publicly, and Dupravel had escaped with his life intact, which was going to trigger 2 major events within the cult. Firstly, a massive manhunt for Dupravel was sure to be launched, with every commoner searching for the Black Serpent's monarch like a rabid dog looking for something to bite on. However, with Dupravel being the skilled assassin that he is, this manhunt was sure to pile up bodies in the tens of thousands, with the cult eventually being forced to either mobilize Charles, or Soren to take him out, since they were the only 2 warriors within the cult capable of making it happen. In this case, if Charles was pulled away from the front lines, the Universal Army could then destroy Juxta that very day, pouring as much manpower as needed to make it happen. And if he was not, and Soren moved himself, then they could gather information on how worse his injuries had gotten over the centuries and whether or not he had an origin metal blade in his possession or not. Either way, it was going to be a massive win for them. Secondly, in the weeks following the aftermath of Dupravel's death, the pressure on the Elders' Council to declare war and seek retaliation for this attack was sure to grow. Here, Morris predicted that the elders desperate to appease their voters would take half-baked steps to satisfy public anger at once and try launching a massive counteroffensive against the righteous faction. Those fools will probably push back and try occupying fresh territories within the righteous faction, Morris muttered, as he could see it playing out as clear as day. The cult armies invading righteous planets, and the decades-long ceasefire finally ending. I'll let them win too. Let a couple planets fall rather quickly. Morris muttered, as an evil grin spread across his face. He wanted the cult's threat to appear larger than it really was, as it would then force the gods of the 6 great clans to once again return to the negotiating table with the universal government, and be forced to hold a meeting regarding the cult's rapid expansion and how to stop it at once. We are in for some very interesting times ahead. Ha ha ha, Morris chuckled. As just thinking about the tumultuous future, he felt excited about all the entertainment unfolding after decades of lull. Chapter 491, Aftermath. Planet Vorthas, the following morning. Anger simmered beneath the pale morning sky as the people of the cult gathered once more in the Sunsteps market, their voices rising in restless waves. The shock from the previous night still lingered in their eyes, their expressions tight with fear and frustration, all of it looking for somewhere to land. Accusations flew freely as the crowd began blaming the cult's defenders for their failure to stop the attack. Their pride had been wounded, their confidence shaken, and Dupravel Nuna's name became the rallying point for both rage and demand. The people wanted justice, they wanted strength, and most of all, they wanted answers. He burned down 9 buildings and killed 26 guards while escaping. He came, he killed, he escaped, while our security forces tried searching for stars in broad daylight. Spit, one man spat, veins bulging on his neck as he shouted atop a merchant's stall, riling up the crowd. Is this the competence level of our security forces? Are these the people in charge of protecting our elder and our dragon? These idiots can't even face a single enemy on home turf. Cries of, "Find him!" and "Bring us his head!" echoed through the square, as every citizen, warrior or common, now had a single name seared into their mind like a curse whispered in the dark: Black Serpent's Guildmaster Dupravel Nuna. Spittle flew, not just in words, but literally, as the names of the district captains responsible for organizing the security of the event were read aloud in an official statement broadcast from the news towers, prompting many to hurl insults, fruit, and even stones at the projection. He made fools out of our finest. Our defense system's a joke. Where were the elite guards? The best tactical units we have at our disposal. Each accusation was louder than the last, all aimed at the cult's internal security force, whose members now walked with their heads hung low, no longer protectors but symbols of shame, forced to endure the humiliation of failure in full public view. And yet, amidst this fiery outrage, 2 names still emerged with fragments of hope and pride attached to them. The dragon did not run. The dragon fought, and lived. It was a sentiment whispered with awe, one that gained traction as more people began to recognize the almost impossible feat of a young dragon holding off a monarch and surviving the encounter. And the 12th elder, he risked his life to help, didn't he? That was him, firing wind shots from the side, wasn't it? He's the only reason Ver could hold that wretched serpent off. A true leader. Applause, faint but growing, began to ripple through the crowd, as a strange cocktail of resentment and reverence began to mix. The commoners were furious at the cult's incompetence, which was only matched by a fervent gratitude toward those few who had not crumbled in the face of a nightmare. Dupravel had left them with blood, fear, and broken pride. But Ver and the 12th elder had at least salvaged something from the wreckage. Meanwhile, inside the Vorthas hospital, The infirmary buzzed with hushed praise and reverent whispers, as attendants moved around Valtary with cautious urgency, tending to the deep stab wound in his palm. They used healing magic to slowly purge the residual poison that was beginning to rot the veins around the wound, doing their best to complete the process as painlessly as possible. To everyone around him, he was a hero, hailed as the man who stood between the dragon and death, the one whose timely action gave Ver just enough breathing room to survive the ambush. But Valtary did not feel like a hero. Not even close. Lying on the cot with bandages wrapped around his hand and his breathing shallow, all he could think about was how quickly he had fallen, how useless he had been after taking a single hit. It didn't matter that the wound had been laced with poison, or that he'd acted on instinct to shield Ver. In his mind, he had failed to protect the dragon beyond the opening moment, and that single truth gnawed at him more deeply than the pain. I need to get stronger, much stronger, he thought, staring at the ceiling as the world outside continued to label him a savior, while all he felt inside was inadequate. Elsewhere, Ver sat alone in the 12th Elder's manor, his back resting against the ornate dragonhide chair reserved for the reigning dragon. Yet for the first time since his appointment, the weight of that seat truly began to sink in. The attack had passed, his wounds were superficial at best, and the crowd outside now chanted his name with newfound reverence, calling him brave, resilient, even worthy, yet none of it brought him peace. He had yearned for this spotlight once, longed for the approval of the masses and the respect of the elders, but now that it was his, now that he had tasted what being the dragon actually meant, all he could feel was a strange sort of emptiness clawing at the edge of his thoughts. Between the endless meetings, the exhausting training, the staged public appearances, and now this assassination attempt in broad daylight, it finally became clear that the position he once thought of as the pinnacle of pride was little more than a gilded cage wrapped in ceremonial garb. The only silver lining to it all was the people's affection, the cheers that drowned his doubt and made his suffering feel slightly less meaningless. But even that, he knew, would fade the moment he failed to meet their expectations. Being a dragon was a thankless job. And the deeper he sank down that rabbit hole, the more he realized that perhaps, the better choice that day would have been to surrender and intentionally lose the bout, letting Leo carry the burden, spotlight, politics, and all the hidden knives that came with it. Chapter 492, Last Hope. First Elder's Paw, Planet Tithia. Even on Tithia, much like every other cult-controlled planet, the outrage surrounding the attack on the dragon was immense. The public pressure to execute Dupravel's son, Darnell, was steadily mounting, and although the First Elder had initially managed to resist the calls for a public execution, more and more of his local union leaders and political backers began demanding action at any cost. Please try to understand, Union leader Tor, we cannot immediately launch an operation to capture righteous faction planets. The Dragon's army hasn't coalitioned properly yet. They need time to band together, form units, study battlefield strategy, and undergo 6 weeks of basic training before they are ready for deployment. We also need to arm and equip them, and prepare new spaceships for an offensive. These decisions cannot be taken on impulse. There is no doubt we will soon launch a decisive response against the righteous faction for daring to attack our hero, but it cannot happen tomorrow. I won't gamble with the lives of our people just to appease public outrage, the First Elder reasoned over the call, while from the other side, the increasingly angry Union leader demanded immediate retaliation from the cult's leadership. By now, this mounting pressure was no longer a problem unique to him. All the elders across every planet were facing the same struggle, each doing their best to contain the public's backlash. Yes, I am in contact with the 12th Elder. I have already sent him my best hunting and tracking unit. Rest assured, we will capture the rat Dupravel Nuna within the next 48 hours. No, we will not kill his son. The boy has committed no crimes against the cult. We are not barbarians, Union leader. We do not slaughter innocents simply because we can or feel like it, the First Elder said, as he pinched his nose in dismay. From the other side, the Union leader began arguing that association by bloodline was itself a crime, citing how the righteous faction had been hunting the timeless assassin's lineage for years now and therefore the cult could apply the same logic to them. But the First Elder refused to buy into that rhetoric. If push came to shove, he would eventually give up Darnell, but for now, at least, he preferred to take the moral high road and present himself as a responsible leader. "Yes, I'll take everything you said here today into consideration," he said at last, before abruptly ending the call and letting out a deep, weary sigh. The calls for blood were growing louder with each passing hour, and if he failed to deliver some form of retaliation to appease the masses, it would only make him appear weak and ineffectual as a leader. "Looks like I might need to deploy Ver to war sooner than expected," the First Elder thought, as he began mentally outlining the framework for Ver's first deployment, one that would most likely involve capturing fresh territory to reassert the cult's dominance. Meanwhile, underground sewers, Dupravel's POV. The scent of rust, mold, and decay filled his nostrils as Dupravel pressed his back against the cold stone wall, his breath shallow and eyes sharp, watching a squad of cult guards rush past the grated tunnel above him, their boots slamming with rhythmic urgency as they shouted instructions to fan out and comb every street corner. "Search for him thoroughly. Leave no stone unturned. The bastard is a master in hiding, so be careful." Their voices faded slowly, swallowed by the endless maze of the underground, as Dupravel allowed himself a moment to breathe, the silence pressing in around him like a second skin. "I cannot trust the plan Morris had orchestrated to get me off this planet," he thought bitterly, his jaw clenching as he looked down at his shaking hand, still bloodstained from the night before. "Which means I'm stuck here until I find my own way out." But even as that thought formed, a darker, quieter question followed in its wake. Do I even want to go back? Because what waited for him outside this sewer, back inside the righteous faction, was nothing more than betrayal, disappointment, and possibly death. He had failed his mission, failed to kill the dragon, and in doing so, placed himself at odds with Morris, the very god who had masterminded this operation. Which meant, regardless of how this ended, his life back at the righteous faction had already come to a quiet close. "I have nothing left on that side," he admitted to himself, as the idea began to take form, slow and treacherous. If possible, he wanted to start again. Not as a spy, not as an assassin, but as a man trying to carve out something real, for himself and for Darnell. The cult only has a single monarch warrior under them. If I join them, I could offer them real strength. I could bring value to their army, enough value to maybe negotiate terms for my son, to give him a life here that isn't bound in chains and watched from behind bars. He knew they would never trust him with freedom. They would most likely leash him like a beast, use him like a tool, a war dog to unleash whenever blood was needed. But if that leash could buy Darnell a life outside his prison, maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. Still, surrendering wasn't going to be easy. With the dragon still alive, and the cult's commoners thirsting for his blood, he deeply doubted that they would simply let him walk in with his hands raised, and expect clemency. There are only two ways this works, he reasoned: either I make them an offer so valuable they cannot refuse it, something that guarantees an audience with Soren himself. Or, I find Leo Skyshard. It was an absurd idea, yet one he couldn't shake. He did not know Leo personally and had only watched him from afar, but something about the boy's eyes when they met back at the Black Serpent headquarters told him that he wasn't one to act rashly. If there's anyone inside the cult I have even half a shot at talking to, without them trying to kill me, it's that boy. Dupravel muttered, as he felt as though Leo might be his last hope at a normal life. Chapter 493, Unexpected Visitor. Meanwhile, at the Skyshard mansion, Leo's POV. With the immediate aftermath of the attack demanding the 12th Elder's undivided attention, Leo and Ver were granted an unplanned day of rest from training. No ships were permitted to enter or exit the planet, and even internal hovercraft movement was banned, all to prevent Dupravel from slipping through the cracks and escaping unnoticed. A massive manhunt is currently underway across the entirety of planet Vorthas, as cult forces continue their desperate search for the fugitive Dupravel Nuna, the man responsible for last night's cowardly assault on the dragon, the anchor declared, his voice urgent, echoing from the television screen into the quiet living room. In a statement released just moments ago, the cult's internal security office confirmed that a reward of 1 million MP will be granted to any individual who provides credible information that directly leads to Dupravel's arrest. The screen flickered between footage of scorched buildings, blurred images of Dupravel's profile, and a series of checkpoints being erected at major intersections throughout the city. Unlike the rest of the city, inside the Skyshard family's living room, the atmosphere was far less tense. Elena sat perched on the couch with a knitted shawl around her shoulders, while Jacob leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, brow furrowed. Amanda sat cross-legged on the carpet, arms folded, eyes fixed on the screen, and Alia sat right beside her. Yawn. Leo let out a lazy yawn, his eyes half-lidded, as he glanced toward the flashing images on the TV, feeling completely unimpressed. They won't catch Dupravel in a million years, unless Charles or Soren personally step in, he muttered, reaching for a bowl of fruit on the side table and casually tossing a grape into his mouth. One of the cult's biggest flaws is its lack of high-level leadership. No monarchs, no demigods, aside from Charles, the entire chain of command collapses once Soren's occupied. And that's the cult's biggest weakness. Alia turned to him, blinking. A million MP reward though, that's gotta stir up a lot of interest. I mean, some people might start hunting just for the cash, right? Leo shrugged, not even glancing her way. Sure, they'll search. But it won't matter. At Dupravel's level, commoners can't even scratch the surface of his trail, let alone follow it. He leaned back further, arms stretching behind his head. Hell, if I wanted to disappear into this city, with the sewers, slums, and abandoned tunnels beneath every district, I could live here for years without anyone even knowing I was still breathing. His voice was calm, quiet, and without a trace of concern, as though the entire affair was more of an inconvenient blip than a historic act of war. Knock, knock. Suddenly, a knock on the door grabbed Leo's attention, as he groggily stood up and began walking towards the door, half expecting a house patrol soldier to be the one knocking. However, to his absolute shock, when he eventually did open the door, it wasn't a soldier standing on the other side, but rather Dupravel Nuna in the flesh. Block. Almost instantly, Leo lunged at Dupravel with a barehanded strike, but the Black Serpent's guildmaster blocked it effortlessly, his arms moving with the calm precision of a seasoned warrior. I come in peace. I swear, I'm not here to hurt you or your family. I come in peace. Dupravel said quickly, his voice laced with urgency and desperation. By now, both Jacob and Alia had already retrieved their weapons, standing on guard behind Leo, their eyes fixed on the intruder, waiting for a single nod to attack. On one hand, Leo didn't believe a single word coming out of the Black Serpent Guild Master's mouth, but on the other, he could sense that Dupravel wasn't leaking any killing intent whatsoever. His aura remained calm and neutral. There was no trace of hostility in his eyes, no flare of black around his body, nor any of the telltale signs that would usually accompany a lie or hidden motive. You're an extremely wanted man, Guildmaster, and you also tried to kill my cousin just yesterday. Is there any reason I should even consider hearing you out? Leo asked, his voice sharp, eyes narrowed, body tense but still. He didn't trust the man, not even slightly, but he did trust his ability to read aura. And so far, Dupravel wasn't lying. I came to you because I believe you might be the last person inside the cult who's still capable of judging me fairly, Dupravel said, his tone steady but raw. I've been betrayed by the righteous faction. Morris the Deceiver used me, set me up, and left me to rot. If you turn me away now, I'll have no choice but to carve a bloody path off this planet. But that's not what I want. I'd rather negotiate a deal, one that benefits both you and the cult. He paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. All I ask is that you listen to my story for just a few minutes. Give me a fair chance to explain my side. I promise on my honor, I won't waste your time. Leo kept watching his aura, searching for even the faintest flicker of deceit, but it remained clean. No darkness, no spike in emotion. Just quiet conviction. Finally, Leo lowered his fists and exhaled sharply. Sigh. I'm not letting you into my house. That's never going to happen. You're not allowed anywhere near my family. If you want to talk, we can talk here, on the porch, and that too after my family leaves the house entirely." Dupra scoffed under his breath, mildly offended. "If I wanted to cause harm, all of you would already be dead, boy. I walked in unarmed for a reason. I'm not here to fight," he said, spreading his arms and turning slightly to show that he carried no weapons, no belt, no hidden blades. "But fine, have it your way. Let's talk on the porch," he said, as he folded his arms and sat down on the floor, waiting for Leo to finally be ready. Added lore: so if any of you were wondering how Dupra found Leo's home address, then this is what he did. He kidnapped soldiers one after another, tortured them for information, until he finally found out where he lived. Chapter 494, Outrageous Proposal. A few minutes later, the Skyshard mansion. Leo sat on the porch swing, while Dupra settled on the floor in front of him, the two locked in an unbroken stare, caught in a strangely awkward arrangement that felt both tense and absurdly casual at the same time. "So, why exactly can't you go back to the righteous faction?" Leo asked, his curiosity piqued as he wondered just how badly Dupra had burned the bridges that once supported him on that side. "It's suicidal to return without having fulfilled my mission. If I go back now, Morris will have my head," Dupra replied plainly, as Leo raised an eyebrow, his suspicion deepening with every word. "And the serpents? They're gone. The universal government seized our treasure and wiped Twin Fang Planet off the map for daring to resist. Those thugs don't play games." Dupra spoke without a flicker of emotion, yet the aura dancing faintly red around his frame betrayed the depth of what he truly felt inside. "I see," Leo muttered, taken aback by the sheer scale of destruction, for he had lived on Twin Fang Planet for a few months and knew firsthand just how formidable that place once was. "Morris spared me. He had me extracted from Twin Fang before its fall, likely because he wanted to use me as a pawn to eliminate the dragon. But he played me like a fool. He sealed my monarch-level strength to help me slip into cult territory without alerting Soren, then handed me a vial, claiming it would restore my full power. But that was a lie." Dupravel's voice remained steady, but Leo could sense the undercurrent of resentment behind every word, as the man laid bare the full extent of his betrayal. "I see," Leo mused, his fingers brushing his chin as pieces began falling into place. He recalled watching Dupra fight and wondering why the man moved with such dulled power, but the sealed strength now explained it all. "So you realized you'd been betrayed, and over the last 24 hours, you've decided that since they screwed you over, you're going to return the favor by switching sides and seeking sanctuary with the cult?" Leo asked, as Dupra nodded slowly in response. "I only agreed to serve Morris because he promised to help me recover my son from the cult's grip, but that hope is gone now. The only path I see left to live a real life with my son is by joining the cult instead," Dupra confessed, his tone bitter, as he scoffed at the irony of his own words. "Scoff? You must think I'm a fool for loving my son this much. But you won't understand what it's like to be a father until you become one," he added with a self-deprecating shake of his head, while Leo's lips curled into a faint smile. He didn't think less of Dupra for caring about his family. If anything, it made him respect the man even more. Because deep down, Leo knew that had the roles been reversed, he would have done the exact same thing. "All right, let's say I do believe your story, and that you genuinely want to join the cult. But given your recent actions, I'll be honest, negotiating terms for your surrender will be next to impossible unless you present something outrageous." He leaned forward, his tone flat and practical. "So let's not waste time. What's in it for me? What's in it for the cult? And just how far are you willing to go to start over?" Dupra inhaled deeply, his fingers briefly interlocked before he finally spoke again. "I've thought this through, and the only way I see to protect my life is to bind it to yours. Even if I'm the most wanted criminal on this planet, surely the cult won't risk killing me if doing so also kills the Shadow Dragon." He paused, but before he could continue, Leo shot him down. "No, no, no, no. Absolutely not. That is never going to happen." Dupra raised his hand calmly, cutting him off with a gesture for patience. Listen to me, boy. I haven't finished speaking. Leo exhaled and leaned back again, motioning for him to go on. I'm willing to sign a master-slave contract with you, binding myself to you for a full 20 years. My only conditions are that I be allowed to spend at least 30 days a year with my son, and that he be raised in the cult as a free man. Dupravel's voice hardened, no longer pleading, but resolute. In return, I will become the cult's war dog. Send me wherever you please, throw me into any mission or battlefield. But if I somehow survive those 20 years, I want to walk away a free man. Leo's eyes widened, taken aback by both the audacity and the sincerity of the proposal. There's no need to actually include a clause tying my life to yours in the contract. But you must agree to claim there is one. That lie will ensure they don't deploy me recklessly into suicide missions they wouldn't dare assign to you, and is the only safeguard I have against being disposed of the moment I surrender. He sat upright now, his tone sharpened by clarity. In theory, I will be your personal guard, your servant, your slave. But in practice, I expect to be treated with the respect due to a warrior of my caliber. I will fight for you. I will protect you with my life. But don't expect me to clean your boots, wipe your ass, or run errands like a lowly manservant. Dupravel's voice quieted as he reached the end. If you wish, I'll even teach you every secret I've ever learned as an expert assassin. I might not be as good as Soren, but I'm no weakling either. And with that, he locked eyes with Leo one more time. So what do you say, Leo Skyshard? Do you find the terms of my surrender acceptable? So what do you say, Leo Skyshard? Do you find the terms of my surrender acceptable? Dupravel asked, his eyes steady with expectation, but Leo found himself at a complete loss for how to respond. On one hand, the offer was dangerously tempting, almost too good to pass up. Gaining a slave like Dupravel could be a game changer, not just for his own personal growth, but also for the security and stability it could bring to his immediate future. However, the political fallout of such a decision couldn't be ignored. Presenting this arrangement to the Elders' Council and the general public would be an uphill battle at best. Accepting Dupravel instead of executing him might easily be twisted as a sign of weakness, or worse, as an act of sympathy towards the righteous faction. And with the current tension in the cult's internal structure, the optics of such a decision mattered more than ever. The deal, while undeniably valuable, came with enough surrounding filth and complications to rival its worth, but that was life in a nutshell. In life, nothing ever came for free. So give me some clarity on this, are you still a monarch or not? And who exactly would you be subservient to, me personally, or the cult? Leo asked, narrowing his gaze, trying to untangle the potential chaos ahead, as Dupravel frowned, clearly expecting that line of questioning. Yes, I'm still a monarch, but my strength is currently restricted to the transcendent realm. I don't know how to restore myself to my peak, but I'm confident that a method exists, and Soren likely knows what it is. Dupravel paused before answering the second part of the question, his voice level and candid. As for subservience, I would be loyal to you, not to the cult. But since you're a pawn of the cult yourself, I don't see much of a difference between the two, he added casually, as Leo chuckled faintly at the sharp edge hidden in that honesty. Interesting, he muttered, rubbing his chin, as his thoughts began racing at full speed. Taking Dupravel in would definitely make his life harder in many ways. The chances of him being deployed to the front lines with a volatile monarch as his slave would be incrementally higher than if he did not have Dupravel under his fold. After all, the cult would never risk unleashing Dupravel onto the battlefield without attaching a leash strong enough to yank him back, meaning his master. And yet, there was another angle to consider. Having Dupravel under his command might grant him the leverage he desperately needed to defy the Elders' Council. If used sparingly, it could act as a stabilizing force, a shield of sorts, against the cult's more reckless or self-serving demands. After all, with a monarch-level slave by his side, any threat of rebellion would carry real weight, enough to make even the Elders' Council pause. If the two of them ever went rogue, it would cost the cult dearly to rein them in, which made for the perfect leverage to refuse dangerous missions. This is a difficult decision, no matter how I think about it. There are just as many pros as there are cons to accepting this deal, Leo thought, his mind churning with conflicting calculations as he continued to wrestle with the choice. I need a moment to think, Leo said, as he stood up from the porch swing, his arms folding behind his back as he slowly began pacing the narrow stretch of space that circled the front of the mansion. His footsteps were slow, measured, almost silent against the stone-tiled floor, as though he was subconsciously trying to stretch the moment just a little longer to buy himself more time to think. Dupra remained seated, watching him without speaking, as though understanding that any interruption might shatter the fragile silence Leo was trying to navigate. The wind was light, brushing past Leo's face as he walked toward the far corner of the porch, where the open sky stretched wide before him. His eyes lingered on that endless blue canvas for a long moment, breathing in the quiet, as if hoping that the answer would simply descend from above. When suddenly he recalled Luke, and how his brother had some very suspicious gaps in his memory. It might be nothing, but on the off chance there is something dark ongoing with my brother, I might need Dupravel's expertise and strength to make it right, Leo thought, as in the end, it was that singular point that swayed him to accept the deal. Sigh. Leo let out a deep breath, one that seemed to empty every conflicted thought pressing against his ribs, as he turned away from the railing and walked slowly back toward the porch swing. His hands were still clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable, but there was a certain clarity in his gaze now, a sharpened stillness that hadn't been there before. He stopped just short of sitting, choosing instead to remain half-standing as he faced Dupravel directly. I accept, he said at last, the words falling out slowly, like stone being set in place. But only under the exact terms you proposed. No last-minute additions, no subtle alterations, and no hidden agendas. Dupravel gave a silent nod, his expression betraying neither triumph nor relief, as if he too knew that this was only the beginning of a far more complicated arrangement. Leo continued, his voice steady. 30 days a year with your son. He'll be raised within the cult, as a free man, so long as he abides by its rules. In return, you will serve me, personally, for 20 years. No theatrics. No rebellion. No under-the-table communications with outsiders. He paused for a moment, studying the man before him. You'll be presented as my personal guard and war dog. The cult will be told that your life is bound to mine, even though it won't be. That lie is the only thing protecting you, so I suggest you act like it's the truth. Dupravel remained silent, his dark black eyes unwavering, the faintest flicker of understanding passing across them. I won't treat you like a servant. But I won't treat you like an equal either. You may be a monarch, Dupravel, but you're here because you failed. Because you were betrayed. Because you had nowhere else to go. You will fight for me. You will bleed for me. And when necessary, you will protect me with your life. Another pause. But until then, you live. And if, somehow, you survive the full 20 years, and survive them by faithfully completing your duty to me as my slave, then sure, you will have earned your freedom. Dupravel bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the gravity of what had just been said. I accept, he murmured, his voice low and calm. Good, Leo replied, finally sitting down once more on the porch swing, his eyes drifting up again toward the sky, where the wind had just begun to pick up. The clouds were shifting slowly, peeling apart like layers of silk above him, and somewhere in the distance, unseen but inevitable, the future was already stirring, already rewriting itself, one consequence at a time. Chapter 496, Signing the Contract. Once the terms of his surrender were set, Dupravel reached into his inner coat pocket and retrieved a tightly sealed scroll made of spirit-forged parchment, its edges glowing with faint silver light. He gently unrolled it across the porch table, where the mana in the air instantly responded, forming a soft hum around the document. This is an item I prepared long ago, in case I ever needed to bind myself to someone with no room for betrayal, Dupravel explained quietly, his fingers brushing the surface with a tinge of regret. It was clear from his actions that this was a contingency plan to save his life that he had made years ago. A sort of last resort, if he had no other way out. Shua. Next, from his spatial storage ring, he summoned a feathered quill, shaped from the spine of a phoenix beast, and placed it beside a small glass vial of transparent ink. In case you don't know, let me explain how this soul-binding technique works. The moment the two of us drip our blood into the ink blot, the three elements of the spirit contract will start working together, and the soul contract will be written out automatically. The wordings on the soul contract will be written according to the spirit of our verbal agreement, which will leave no room for loophole exploitation through clever contract wording. Dupra explained, as he bit his own thumb and was the first to drip his blood into the ink blot, which immediately changed color from transparent to red. Leo followed afterwards, doing the same. Shua. Scribble. As his blood settled, the soul-binding technique began to react, weaving faint red glyphs in the air above the parchment. Leo leaned forward, reading the terms as they appeared one by one, each line etched by the contract itself in response to their verbal agreement. Soul-binding agreement. Between Leo Skyshard, Master, and Dupraval Nuna, Slave. 1. Service term. Dupraval Nuna shall serve Leo Skyshard for a total duration of 20 years, effective immediately upon the completion of this ritual. Furthermore, he will only be freed from his service should he faithfully carry out his duty as a slave for the entire duration of the contract. 2. Obedience clause. Dupraval Nuna shall obey all commands issued by Leo Skyshard, so long as they do not involve the following. Directly ordering Dupraval to kill himself. Commanding Dupraval to harm or kill his son. Forcing Dupraval to extend the duration of this contract beyond 20 years. Forcing Dupraval to perform menial duties befitting a manservant. 3. Custodial clause. Dupraval shall be allowed 30 full days per year to spend with his son, with said son permitted to live freely within cult territory under basic compliance with cult laws. 4. Public narrative clause. Leo Skyshard shall publicly claim that Dupraval's life is bound to his own, and this lie shall not be refuted under any circumstance, for the safety and political protection it provides, unless the other party already knows it to be false. 5. Combat service clause. Dupraval shall serve as Leo's personal guard, operative, and war dog, deployed to battlefields, missions, or investigations solely at Leo's discretion. 6. Knowledge transfer clause. Dupraval shall share all assassin techniques, combat insights, and tactical knowledge accumulated throughout his life with Leo Skyshard over the span of his service. 7. Slave service clause. Dupraval shall not harbor any thoughts of betraying his master, nor shall he go against his master's wishes, or act against his best interest under any circumstances. 8. Truth clause. Dupraval Nuna may not lie to or mislead Leo Skyshard under any circumstances, regarding any detail. 9. Breach consequence clause. Should either party willfully break even a single clause of this contract, their souls shall burn to ash instantly and irreversibly, leaving behind no vessel for revival, resurrection, or reincarnation. When the final clause etched itself into the parchment, the silver glow around it darkened to crimson. Now if you press a bloody thumb to the contract paper, it will take hold, Dupraval said, as he pressed out a few more drops of blood and impressioned them on the paper. The parchment sizzled on contact, accepting the offering as the glyphs flared brighter. Leo didn't hesitate, since he found the terms of the contract acceptable, he too did the same and let his blood fall on the other side, directly above his name. The moment the second impression touched the parchment, the ritual activated. A sharp gust of wind spiraled around them as red chains of soul energy emerged from the contract, wrapping around their wrists before sinking inside, binding their souls together with an invisible thread that pulsed once, then vanished. Leo's pupils dilated slightly. He could feel it. A tether. Not physical, not emotional, but something intangible. If Dupraval so much as entertained the thought of betraying him, that thread would tighten, burn, and drag him to ruin. Conversely, if he too broke any clause of the agreement, the same would happen to his own. It's done, Leo said, his voice calm and cold. Dupraval lowered his head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Yes, from this moment onward, I am your servant. And though neither of them smiled, both understood that something irreversible had just occurred. There was no backing out of it now. Dash. Meanwhile the 12th Elder. Crash. The 12th Elder slammed his fist against the wooden desk, causing several data slates to flicker as a dozen police commanders flinched in silence. I want Dupraval Nuna found within the next 24 hours. He barked, his voice slicing through the room like a serrated blade. I don't care how many sectors you have to sweep, how many drones you need to launch, or how many walls you need to tear down. You must find him. One of the junior commandants stepped forward, uncertain. We've already placed restrictions on interplanetary and intraplanetary travel, Elder. Dupraval couldn't have left Vorthas. Then where the hell is he hiding? The Elder snapped, rising to his feet, his white robe swirling behind him. You think he just vanished into thin air? That he turned to smoke. He turned, walking over to the wall-to-wall window behind him, overlooking the bustling capital of Vorthas, where massive banners bearing the cult insignia had begun to appear across every common house building. The nationality wave was on the rise amongst the masses after yesterday's attack, and so was his reputation. He was now the man who had stood tall during the cult's 11th hour and faced off bravely against Dupraval the Killer. Currently, the narrative of his bravery was spreading like wildfire, and for the first time in his life, he could feel momentum rising behind his name, not just in Vorthas but across all cult territories. If he played his cards right, if he rode the wave while the public still roared his name, he could secure planetary seats in not one, but at least half a dozen additional systems during the next election cycle. This moment could be the turning point, the defining arc of his political career. But that was only if he delivered Dupraval's head. If we don't capture him before the news cycle shifts, everything we gained will evaporate. The masses are simple, they cheer today, forget tomorrow. I need a public execution, not a ghost story. He turned back to the room, his gaze sharp and suffocating. Send the elite trackers. Authorize bounty hunters, local informants, hell even the army, I don't care who finds him first. Just make sure they know what's at stake. The one who brings me Dupraval's location gets full rank elevation and 5 million MP personally from me as a reward. The room fell into stunned silence. 5 million. One of the senior officers repeated under his breath. I want him found, the Elder growled. Alive or dead, but preferably alive. The cameras work better when the villain is still breathing. He didn't wait for a response. His orders had already turned into a storm. Officers scrambled out of the room, their earpieces lighting up with commands, dispatches, and deployment orders. The 12th Elder stepped back to his desk, watching a broadcast of himself being replayed on Vorthas Channel 1. His voice, his image, righteous, unwavering, beloved. But it would mean nothing without a closing chapter. He needed Dupraval, and he was ready to burn the underworld to ash to get him. Chapter 497, A Difficult Conversation. Vorthas, Central District, streets near Sector 3. Excuse me. Can you redirect me to where the 12th Elder lives? Leo asked, his voice low but clear as he stopped a passing middle-aged man by the side of the street. The man blinked, startled at first, before his eyes widened in shock as he took in Leo's face. Lord Shadow Dragon, he exclaimed, practically stumbling as he bowed at the waist, eyes shimmering with pride. It would be my honor to show you the way. Before Leo could reply or object, the man spun on his heel and gestured eagerly. Please, this way. It's a bit of a walk, but I'll take you directly. It's not every day I get to help such an important figure. Leo gave a faint, tired nod and followed in silence, his hands tucked loosely in his robe pockets as the two of them merged into the flow of foot traffic. The streets of Vorthas were alive, filled with angry chatter and banners of the cult hanging high from the windows above, rippling lightly in the breeze. I heard the 12th Elder's residence has tighter security than the Ixtal Vault, the man said as they turned onto a narrower street, clearly trying to make conversation. And rightly so. With that bastard Dupraval still lurking somewhere out there, we can't afford to let our guard down. He spat on the ground, disgusted, before glancing sideways at Leo. The attack yesterday, unforgivable, wasn't it? All those brave officers, slaughtered like pigs. The dragon attacked on our home planet before our very eyes. And for what? One man's madness. Leo didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched as his boots struck the stone path in rhythm with the man's rambling. Every word was a reminder of the knife he was about to twist into the elder's plans. Every sentence spoken in faith was a weight added to the guilt he carried. Because not only had he decided to not turn in Dupra to the authorities, he had also allied with him as his master. Leo could already imagine the 12th Elder's expression. The twitch in his eye. The clenched jaw. The storm he'd barely suppressed the last time they met, when Leo had spat on the dragon title and walked away from the responsibility he was meant to claim. And now, he was about to deliver an even worse piece of news. The irony was almost poetic. This time, Leo wasn't coming to make empty promises. This time, he had already committed the crime, and was coming to ask for an apology. I don't know what the elder will do when he hears this. Leo muttered under his breath, his gaze falling to the ground for a moment. But it's too late to change anything now. He had already made his bed. And now he had to sleep in it. Here, Lord Shadow Dragon, that building at the end of this street is the elder's residence, the middle-aged man said, pointing toward a high-walled estate layered with metal barricades, fortified gates, and cult banners hanging from every arch. Leo's eyes narrowed slightly at the overwhelming display of security, which felt more like a public theater performance than actual protection. Thank you for helping me, kind sir, he replied, offering a half-smile before making his way toward the front gate. The moment he approached, one of the perimeter guards stepped forward and raised a hand. Halt. State your, the man began, only to freeze mid-sentence as he got a proper look at Leo's face. His posture straightened immediately, then dropped into a deep bow. My apologies, Lord Shadow Dragon. Please, this way. Another guard had already tapped his communicator, speaking hastily into the earpiece to announce Leo's arrival. Leo exhaled, slow and tired, as he crossed the barricade and was escorted inside. Buffoons, he thought to himself. What if I wasn't me? What if I was Dupra pretending to be me using a simple shapeshift skill? Would they still roll out the red carpet? He said nothing aloud, of course. It wasn't the time to pick a fight with the cult's security forces, no matter how laughably incompetent they were. Still, the ease with which he'd passed through all those layers of defense left a sour taste in his mouth. If Vorthas really was on high alert, then this display was nothing but a farce. He followed the guards in silence, winding through long, polished hallways and waiting rooms too extravagant for their purpose, until they stopped before a set of double doors. Please wait here, sir. The 12th Elder is being informed of your arrival, one of the guards said before stepping inside, leaving Leo to pass the time by inspecting the shine on his shoes. A few minutes later, an assistant stepped out and gave a respectful nod. The 12th Elder will see you now, Lord Shadow Dragon. Leo walked in slowly, head slightly lowered, already dreading the conversation ahead. Skyshard, if you're here to talk about training, don't waste my time, the 12th Elder said sharply the moment Leo stepped through the door. I've already arranged a hovercraft to take you and Ver to the training facility tomorrow morning. So if that's all, save it. I'm dealing with more pressing matters right now. Leo blinked, mildly caught off guard, before glancing around the room, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the sight of nearly a dozen uniformed officials crammed into the Elder's office. Local police captains, elite unit commanders, special division heads. All seated, all tense. No, I'm not here about that, Leo said cautiously. I'm actually here to talk about Dupra. The moment the name left his lips, the temperature in the room seemed to suddenly drop by a couple degrees. All conversation ceased. Every head in the room turned toward him. I know his current location. He has relayed through me the terms of his surrender. Leo said, as he saw the expression on the face of the 12th Elder turn from one of extreme excitement to mild surprise. Surrender? What surrender? Bastard killed my sworn brother Noah in cold blood. The only mercy he's going to receive in the cult is the mercy of death. The Elder retorted, as Leo clicked his tongue in disagreement. Yeah, about that. Chapter 498, The Art of Spinning a Story. Yeah, about that. Leo began, reading the room and immediately recognizing that the unfiltered truth was not going to be accepted well here. Hence, for the sake of his own survival, he came to the conclusion that a boss-level performance was necessary to fool the crowd. You cannot kill Dupra, 12th Elder, because if he dies, so do I. He led with that, letting the words linger long enough to stir confusion across the faces watching him. That dastardly Black Serpent's guildmaster, he showed up to my front door just a few hours ago. Leo shook his head and paused, as if reliving the trauma, then widened his eyes and continued, voice low and shaken. Imagine my shock. I was just sitting with my family in the living room, completely unarmed, sharing a quiet moment, when that monster, that criminal, was suddenly standing there on my porch, looking like death himself. He took a stumbling step forward, pretending to lose balance, then dramatically collapsed to one knee. He was there, ready to kill. I saw it in his eyes. I felt it in my bones. Bam! Leo suddenly shouted, making several men flinch as he slammed his hand on the floor. I fell to my knees and begged for mercy. I said, "Oh Sir Dupra, please, please don't kill my mother and my old man father. Spare me. I'll do anything you wish." Leo placed a hand over his chest and let out a pained groan, like the memory itself hurt to recount. His voice cracked with emotion. I thought he wouldn't accept. I thought it was over. That surely, he was going to kill me. But then, shockingly, he stopped, seemingly lost in thought for a while, after which he pulled out a blank master-slave contract and told me to start writing the terms of my surrender. Leo paused, letting his eyes drift across the room, meeting every gaze with carefully crafted vulnerability. He demanded that I find his son Darnell, that I help the boy live a free life inside the cult. And in return, he would enslave me for 20 years. Leo's shoulders trembled. I didn't want to be anyone's slave. Gods, who would? But I had no choice. I had to protect my family. So with trembling hands, I picked up the pen and began writing out the contract terms, word for word, as he dictated them. Leo's voice shifted slightly, tone now colored with disbelief. That's when I noticed it, something shocking. Something almost unbelievable. Leo said, gulping, as he built anticipation. Dupra, though glancing into the paper directly, seemed like he couldn't read what I was actually writing. He kept asking me why I was writing so slow, but couldn't actually gauge how much was written. Leo revealed, as he straightened his back and smiled. I'd written the first 2 clauses. 1, about Darnell's freedom, and 2, about our lives being pegged to one another. And while he stood beside me, pretending to glance through the paper, I realized he wasn't reading a word. At first, I couldn't believe it. I thought, no, surely not. Surely Dupra Nuna couldn't be illiterate, he was a guildmaster after all. And was often buried in paperwork. But then, as I recalled those reports, the ones that said Dupra had gone feral inside a time-stilled world, that his mind had been shattered upon return, something began to click. I couldn't be sure, but I theorized that maybe the part of his brain responsible for literacy had been damaged while he was in there. Leo exhaled, hands lifting theatrically. So I made a decision to test my theory, and began altering the contract, as from clause 3 onwards, I reversed our names wherever they were mentioned. I changed the master from Dupra to myself. Switched the slave from me to him. Changed the clause that said I would serve him for 20 years, to him serving me for 20 years instead. He took a deep breath, then let his voice drop to a hush for impact. And in the end, as both our blood hit the parchment, the soul chains ignited, and now, Dupra Nuna, monarch of the Black Serpents, is bound to me. As my personal slave. Leo wiped a fake tear from his cheek, shaking his head as if still overwhelmed by the events. Of course, there's a downside. Our lives are still tied. If he dies, I die too. There's no undoing that part. But the upside. Leo gestured broadly. He's subservient. Entirely and absolutely. Bound by the soul laws. Can't defy a single command. And that means the cult now has a monarch tier war asset, fully loyal, entirely obedient, and available for deployment. Difficult missions, near-suicidal objectives, elite operations we once couldn't attempt due to a lack of manpower, Well, now we can. Leo clapped his hands once, softly, and forced a small smile. I may have suffered greatly, but in the end, I believe I've secured a strategic victory for the cult. He looked around the room, heart pounding beneath the surface, silently praying that his performance had been convincing enough to sell the lie, but unfortunately for him, while the police captains seemed moved by his bullshit, the 12th Elder was not. So what you're telling me in essence, Skyshard, is that we cannot kill Dupra anymore, the murderer of my sworn brother, because killing him would kill you too. The 12th Elder asked, as Leo clapped his hands and shook his head from side to side. Of course we can. To appease the wrath of the general public, a mock execution can always be performed. One where the death of Dupra is but an illusion, but it makes the commoners feel like we have won. As for actually killing him, our bond ends in 20 years. So after it expires, feel free to exact your revenge. But till then, I think it's best that we use him as the asset he is, and deploy him strategically to the cult's advantage, Leo said, as at this moment, he saw the eyes of the 12th Elder change, as finally, he too seemed to get on board with the idea. Morris the Deceiver who? Take a bow. Leo lying piece of shit Skyshard. Chapter 499, Applause. Well, since your life is tied to him, we have no other choice but to let him live for now, the 12th Elder finally said, his voice gravelly as he cleared his throat and adjusted his posture. After all, even if it's to kill Dupra, we surely can't sacrifice the Shadow Dragon. A collective murmur of agreement rippled through the room, with each police captain nodding along, as if the decision had always been this obvious. You've performed most admirably under duress, Skyshard. It's no small feat to fool a criminal like Dupra. I'll make sure you're rewarded properly for this, the Elder added, his tone shifting so smoothly it was almost comical. Just moments ago, the man had been one sentence away from ordering Leo's execution, but now he was smiling faintly, already envisioning the grand spectacle of a fake public execution, one that would restore faith in the cult leadership, pacify the masses, and elevate his personal status to the moon all at once. Cheers. Claps. The captains in the room began applauding, some even rising from their chairs as they clapped Leo on the back and offered congratulatory nods, eyes shining with relief. Because in more ways than one, Leo was their savior as well. The pressure to capture Dupra had been crushing. The media circus, the public unrest, the fear of losing face and officer lives in the process of hunting a monarch tier threat was enough to break lesser men. But now, all of that had been swept off the table. The criminal had been caught, the narrative was in place, and not a single officer had to risk their life to make it happen. Sure, none of them were going to get a slice of that massive reward, but compared to what could have happened, this outcome was not bad at all. This news is not to leave this room. Do you all understand? The 12th Elder barked suddenly, his voice sharp and authoritative once more. You heard nothing here today. Not a word. Because if even a whisper of the truth leaks out, and someone, in a moment of outrage, tries to kill Dupra, then the Shadow Dragon may die alongside him. His warning struck home instantly. Each security head nodded solemnly, some even placing a hand over their heart as they swore to keep the secret buried. Leo stood there quietly, letting the applause wash over him, offering slight bows and half smiles as the captains praised him like he'd saved the damn planet. In truth, he'd just lied through his teeth and enslaved one of the deadliest men alive for his own personal gains, but in the cult's eyes, he was now a hero. And for now, that was all that mattered. Wait in the lobby for a moment, Skyshard, the 12th Elder said as he turned back to his desk. I'll inform the other elders of Dupravel's apprehension. Leo nodded once and stepped out of the room, walking through the polished hallway as the door shut behind him. He didn't say a word. Because if there's one thing he knew, it was that every lie had a timer ticking beneath it. And his was already counting down. Sooner or later, the people of the cult were bound to find out what truly happened here today. But perhaps, if it was delayed to a distant enough future, then the outrage surrounding the truth would not be as extreme. A few hours later, planet Tithia, the First Elder's chambers. The First Elder's brows furrowed as he finished reading the memo on his data slate, then scrolled back up and read it again. Slowly, line by line, just to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Dupra Nuna, apprehended, alive, and apparently enslaved by Leo Skyshard. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as he reread the final paragraph one more time, blinking in silence. What in the actual hell? It was hard to say whether he wanted to applaud the 12th Elder for resolving the biggest security threat of the century without a single casualty, or slap him for the exact same reason. Because buried underneath all the celebration, behind all the grandstanding and fake execution planning, there was one very glaring issue. Dupra was not subservient to the cult. He was subservient to Leo. Not ideal, the First Elder thought, clicking his tongue as he set the data slate down. Leo had already been moving with more freedom than any dragon candidate ever should, being openly backed by Charles and never being held accountable for anything. And now, with Dupra, an actual monarch-tier asset, bound to him through a soul contract, he was sure to become even more independent. With Dupra under his leash, his political weight increases. Although he's not strong enough right now, in 5 or 7 years' time, when he inevitably becomes a peak transcendent himself, the boy would be far gone from our control. The First Elder's fingers tapped idly against the wooden armrest of his chair. For now, Skyshard was still manageable. Contained. Predictable, to some extent. But if things kept progressing like this, the day would soon come where they wouldn't be able to rein him in. Not without risking a full-blown confrontation. And that was not a scenario the cult was ready for. The 12th Elder clearly hadn't thought that far ahead. Too busy celebrating his victory. Too blinded by the theatrics of a fake execution and the sweet political capital it promised. The First Elder sighed and leaned forward again, closing the memo. It wasn't ideal. Not even remotely. But what could he do about it now? The decision to spare Dupra was already made by the 12th Elder. The soul contract with Leo was already signed. The other elders would soon follow suit. And once the narrative settled in the public's mind, there'd be no reversing it without sparking internal chaos. So he exhaled, clicked his tongue once more, and pushed the thought to the back of his mind. One problem at a time, Mavern. Even you can't solve everything at once. 1 month later, Planet Vortha's secret training arena. Huff, huff. Leo breathed heavily, sweat trickling down his forehead as he focused on perfecting the final piece of the transformation. He had currently shape-shifted into Charles, and visually, he now looked exactly like the monarch, except for 2 key details, the habitual smoker's frown and the precise coloration of his body hair. You've nailed the transformation, Skyshard, but what you haven't mastered yet is the expression. Right now, you look like a tired mule rather than an honorable commander, the 12th Elder remarked, watching critically as Leo grinned and let his exhausted body collapse to the floor. Learning shapeshift had proven to be a real challenge, especially when it came to mastering facial symmetry, but Leo had pushed through the hardest parts and was nearly there now. Well, almost, since he still had to learn the final step, which involved altering his voice and hair color to fully match the person he was impersonating. Pant, pant. A few meters away, Ver panted heavily as well, as he continued to struggle with restructuring his face. Although he too had managed to achieve full body transformation, he remained 1 step behind Leo when it came to accurately mimicking facial features. To be honest, you're both performing most admirably. You're on track to master this skill in 35 days or less, when I had initially expected it to take at least 100 days or more. For reference, it took Noah 111 days to master shapeshift, and he was already considered a genius, the 12th Elder added, as Leo laughed while still rolling around in the dirt. Apart from the obvious benefit that learning the skill brought, the training had also drastically improved Leo's bone and muscle mobility. Compared to before he began training, his body now felt far more fluid and adaptable in every sense, since he had repeatedly begun to alter his bone and muscle structure. All right, Huff. I'm ready to learn the last step. How do you change the damn hair color and voice? Leo asked, wiping his brow as he turned his head. But the 12th Elder only shook his head, looking unconvinced. No. First, you'll rest up and learn how to properly act like Charles. Only after that will I teach you the final step, he insisted, his tone brooking no argument. Leo groaned and sat back down on his butt, still catching his breath. Also, there's some exciting news for both of you, the 12th Elder began again, his face shifting from neutral to mischievous, as his eyes alternated between Leo and Ver. The two of you have been assigned your first mission. You're both going to be deployed to planet Coral very soon, he announced, and both Leo and Ver instinctively stiffened, their faces growing wary. Once you've mastered shapeshift, the two of you will be sent to Coral under the false identities of Lieutenant Aaron and Lieutenant Larry. Your task will be to infiltrate the enemy camp's military forces. The objective is to gather intel on their planetary defense systems, and determine the best way to disable them. The cult is planning a full-scale invasion of Coral in approximately 4 to 6 weeks. And before that happens, it will be your job, as the Dragon and Shadow Dragon, to come up with a viable plan of attack. Because when the time comes, it will be your dragon's army that leads the charge, the 12th Elder revealed, as Leo felt a tight knot form in his stomach. Don't worry, you'll receive a detailed mission briefing once you've fully mastered shapeshift and are ready for deployment. For now, just consider this a heads up regarding what's expected of you in the next couple of weeks. The 12th Elder finished, then turned and calmly walked out of the training hall, leaving Leo and Ver behind to process the gravity of what lay ahead. Fuck me, I can understand them deploying you, but why the hell are they sending me too? Leo muttered in frustration, as a faint maroon aura began to coil around his body. Well, I'm glad they are. I wouldn't want to go undercover out there alone, Ver replied, glancing at Leo with a cautious look on his face. Also, I think your deployment might have something to do with that masked shadow guard of yours. You claim he's your slave and a transcendent tier warrior, but Valtary swears that he's got the aura of a monarch. Ver continued, his eyes narrowing as he studied Leo's reaction closely. It's funny, isn't it? The cult held a public execution for Dupra Nuna just a few days ago, and then, suddenly, you appear with a new monarch tier slave. Especially strange considering no monarch besides Charles has existed within the cult in the last 500 years. Ver's voice hardened slightly, the undertone in his words now clearly accusatory. Surely, your masked guard isn't Dupra, right, cousin? He asked at last. Leo simply shrugged, offering no real answer. My slave was a transcendent when I signed the contract with him, he said casually. And though his words weren't technically a lie, the way he said it made it sound as though Dupra wasn't the guard in question, which was, of course, false. In truth, Dupra's peak strength had gradually returned to him over the past 30 days, without any special effort needed to restore it. Whatever strength restoration potion Morris the Deceiver had administered seemed to have worked far more slowly than anticipated, but in the end, it had indeed worked. Dupra had his powers back and was now a monarch again, which raised quite a lot of eyebrows wherever he went. Well, either way, I guess we are soon going to be teammates. I hope I can leave my back to you, cousin, in case things go wrong. Ver said as Leo nodded in agreement. You can. But try not to fuck up, it's not my style to slow down for slowpokes like you, Leo teased, as Ver chuckled heartily. Ha ha ha, just you wait. In the next skill training, I'll surely be a couple steps ahead of you. He retorted, as Leo simply rolled his eyes in response. First of all, Chapter 500, and we have hit this milestone in just 157 days. So yeah, let's FC King go. Secondly, I will try cover tidbits of what happened in the last 1 month, like Dupra's execution, the cult releasing his son, him taking on a mask to be beside Leo and more, during active chapters. Because I feel like it will drag the pacing too much if I show it chronologically and spend whole chapters describing it. So keep an eye out for those bits. Lastly, I want to take a moment and thank you all for your constant comments and support. I don't respond to those thank you for the chapter comments every day, but I do read them, and they're the biggest reason behind my consistency. This release rate, and this quality would not be possible without you guys supporting me via golden tickets, power stones, gifts and comments. And I'm genuinely thankful for it all. So 3 cheers for you guys. You're the best. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.